pet friend.
Good afternoon and welcome to the March Middlesex County Board of Supervisors meeting, and I would certainly like to welcome this crowd of citizens here today. We're always very pleased when citizens take part in their county's government. At this point, I'd like to ask Mr. Jesse to open the meeting with prayer, followed by Matt Walker and the Pledge of Allegiance.
Bow our heads in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for just waking us up this morning and letting us see another day, dear Lord. And dear Lord, let's pray for those citizens in Alabama who tornadoes and lost lives and homes and everything. Watch over them, dear Heavenly Father. And dear Lord, I'd like to just thank you for all the citizens that came here this evening that are concerned with county business. And let us make wise and just decisions for county business today. Amen.
Amen. Would all citizens of our nation rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next order of business is the approval of the consent agenda, and I believe, Betty, we had two minor changes or corrections to the minutes.
We did. It was on page 24 and 25 of your packet, which were the February 12th minutes. There was one section that discussed the replacement schedule for school buses. Where, I had put in that it was a monthly replacement, and that
I'm glad that was wrong.
Yeah, it needed to be changed to annual. And the last change was on the where you recessed to the next meeting. And I had the wrong date in there, so it's
Thank
just
you,
to
ma'am.
correct that date. And those corrections have been made.
Thank you. If no one has any other adjustments to the consent agenda, the chair will entertain a motion for approval.
So moved.
Motion second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. So ordered. At this point, I will open the meeting up to public comments. I ask that you please observe our time limit. Betty will have a clock up here. If you're representing, I think, 4 more citizens, you can go a little longer, but if you need to go longer, I'll have to stop you and ask the board if they want to extend that. So, first citizen, please. State your name and address, please.
Sure. Good afternoon. I'm Russ Perkinson. My sister and I own Prospect at Topping on the east side of the airport runway. So just like to say a few words to you. Be well under the 3 minutes. But thank you, Mr. Chairman and Supervisors. We have a 200-year-old house. It's a Virginia Historic Landmark designation. We sent a letter that's attached to your board package, so we're not going to rehash everything in that brief letter. We prefer to leave the airport as it is. However, if a realignment option is pursued, it would impact their property in several ways, since the runway would run significantly closer to our property in the old house. So for reasons stated in the letter, we think we'd be impacted by that. We understand this is just a feasibility study as far as the airport feasibility study. But my experience has been, once proposed concepts are presented to agencies, such as having diagrams with very specific realignment angles specified, they become almost cast in stone and very difficult to have changed as the project progresses, if it does progress. And So in our letter, we suggest a couple of very minor possible adjustments to consider as options. It would eliminate not all the impact by any means, but some of the impact on us if it is realigned, and it would reduce those. I expect there's other possibilities as well that would be worth considering. Most of them are pretty minor changes. And I guess in a nutshell, what we would ask, we'd like to see one sentence added to the feasibility study that just states that deviations from the proposed realignment option may be considered if the project progresses. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next person, please.
Good afternoon. Robert Jackson, Urbana. First, with regards to the workforce housing apartments, I attended the sheriff public meeting yesterday for one purpose and one purpose only, to find out how many deputies would be interested in renting an apartment. What I found was surprising. Out of the 42 people that are on the sheriff payroll, most of them whom are part-time, only one is renting. The other people have their own homes. To me, this is very interesting. Secondly, in regards to all of these grants that are being given to this county, I just hope that all of the stipulations that comes with these are met and none go into default. We all know that if these grants goes into default, the county is responsible for paying that money back. After reading the MOA between HRSD and Middlesex County, it seems things are getting done temporarily just to get the grant. Let's hope all goes as planned, but if not, who should be held accountable for these grants? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next citizen, please. Come on out, all you folks, nobody else has anything to say. In that case, we will close the public comment period and move on to item 3, constitutional officers report. You've got the treasurer's report, pages 47 through 49. As we move down into agency and staff reports, I've had a request. The Middlesex Pet Friends for Life are listed last, and I understand they've got a very short, like 10-minute presentation, and I've been asked to move them up into position D. So if there is no problem with that, we will make that very minor change to agency and staff reports. So item A is VDOT. Looks like we're double teamed again. Joyce, Ron Knuck will come up and join you.
He can if he wants.
Okay.
He'll keep you a lot longer than I will, I think.
Okay, well, let him stay back there and you just continue on.
Good afternoon. I think you have our report here for what we've accomplished through the month of February. These board meetings work out perfect because you can see the whole month pretty much. The other ones in the middle kind of get me messed up. But anyway, one thing I wanted to highlight to make sure everyone was aware of, we will do our best to do some media outreaches and things like that, and when the paving starts. We'll find out on Thursday the schedule of our asphalt paving contractor. We are paving Route 33 here in the village in 17, so pretty much from when you come into town through the whole entire corridor here, we are going to be milling and filling the asphalt out here and putting in new pavement. So a little bit of heartache for a little while, for a long time, hopefully improved surface, so we can get rid of the bump out in front of our brand new office too. So anyway, hopefully there won't be any snags with it and it'll go smoothly, but we'll make sure that we put out message boards and it gets out into the newspaper and things like that. Because we put it on the sheet and I wasn't sure if you were would see that those 3 sections from Route 17 and Route 33 are here in the village of Saluda. We're also paving 623 and 624 in the Hartfield area, as well as Route 3 from Route 33 to the Twig Bridge. So a lot going on in this vicinity this year for resurfacing, and then of course you have your surface treatment things. But other than that, we did complete some work here on some slope repairs and some erosion that's occurred back last year when we had the storm in October. We did replace the 2 sets of lights at the Hartfield Park and Ride. They were replaced last month. They're operational. We haven't got any complaints or compliments, so I guess that's a good thing. So, except from one of the citizens that emailed Supervisor, so that's good. So anyway, other than that, I don't have any other information. We do, I guess, work with staff about the secondary 6-year plan. We'll have to have that public hearing coming up to decide what to do with the funds in the secondary road program, and I'll prepare all that and send it over for everyone to look at pretty soon. So other than that, I'm just here to answer questions. That was quick.
Questions?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Joyce, I wanted to check with you. In your report, you say that the pothole repairs are ongoing. Do you still rely on people reporting those through that MyVDOT
Yeah,
site?
we
Is
definitely
that
welcome
helpful?
the extra set of eyes, yep.
Okay. And then that just goes on through the whole spring?
We're constantly,
and
yeah.
of it. And then I had another question about shoulders. Are those on a schedule with the road repaving, or does that come under a pothole? I've had a couple of comments from a couple of mail carriers that are concerned with all the rain and everything, the drop off, and of course they're always going to the edge of the pavement. Is that something that is on a schedule, or should that be reported individually?
We work on our shoulders on the primary road on a more frequent basis. Secondaries, we do as needed, or if we repave them. If a mail carrier has an issue, they can call our service center or the residency office, and they can let us know where they are.
Okay.
A lot of times, people have their mailboxes further behind where the normal shoulder is. Our requirement is that we maintain the normal shoulder, so if the shoulder is this wide going down the entire road, for instance, and their mailbox area is this wide, we're only really required to maintain this smaller piece. So, and a lot of times we go ahead and we'll fix those places that are beyond that shoulder. We just need to know where they are.
Okay.
So they can just let us know. So we sometimes have discrepancies on what we fix and what we don't, and sometimes that becomes an issue with carriers. But we usually try to work with them
Okay,
to get it done.
thank you.
Thanks for the work at the Park and Ride. When do you think VDOT can have an answer for Twiggs Ferry Road and sort of the emails that I sent regarding the amount of crashes that we've seen on Twiggs Ferry?
Ron actually initiated a study for that. We'll look at the data we have, compile the information. Our traffic engineering office will look at it. They will usually get us something back in 2 or 3 weeks. It usually doesn't take a long period of time unless they need to do some sort of follow-up studies or request reports from the sheriff's office or the state police that haven't made it into our database yet.
Thanks.
Just to clarify, I hate to
Told you he had to talk.
She got you.
Our main traffic engineer's been out, had some service, so it's okay. But I got word it'll be about 30 days.
That's fine.
Well, look at that.
Well, Joyce, thank you. It's always nice to
right.
have you grace our meeting.
And as always, I'm just a phone call, text, or an email away, so
Thank you.
you'll have fun.
Moving right along to school matters. Dr. Peter Gretz. Come on up, Dr. Pete.
Good afternoon, members of the board, Mr. Walker, Ms. Muncy, and citizens, attendees. I am here to officially ask the board to appropriate funds in the amount of $188,500 that were donated by the community foundation group, the Friends of Middlesex County Public Schools, for the purposes of joining funds that the county offered to finish out the lighting of the Sid Thrift athletic fields.
Ladies and gentlemen.
I move that we honor the appropriation.
I'll second.
I have a motion duly seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. So ordered.
Thank you so much.
That's everything you like.
And if I could have 30 seconds, I'd love to specifically call your attention to 2 upcoming events that if you'd be interested in attending. March 21st is the Fine Arts Festival at our elementary school at 6 p.m., March 21st. And March 26th at 8 o'clock in the morning, you may have already been invited to this, and if you haven't yet, you will get an official invitation. 8 o'clock in the morning at Sinclair Walker, the redesignation of the middle school as a schools to watch school, there'll be a celebration, and that's a pretty big deal in the state, and we'd love to see you there if you're interested. I'm going to distribute spring sports schedules. If you're interested in those, I will tell you in the brief moments since I printed these, Charles City is having some trouble knowing what they're going to be able to participate in, so these may change as quickly as I hand them to you. But for now, these are the schedules. Any questions for me?
Thank you,
Okay,
Dr. Peter.
thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next, we have the Department of Social Services, a report only on pages 55 through 57 of your board packet. And at this point, we will hear from the Middlesex Pet Friends for Life, Kate Ogden.
Good afternoon, members of the board, county administrators. First of all, thank you very much for giving us this opportunity to getting to know you kind of presentation. It's been 4 years since Middlesex Pet Friends incorporated as a nonprofit organization to be advocates for the Middlesex shelter animals. And in those 4 years, I cannot tell you how many times people have said, "You have a shelter? What do you mean, Pet Friends? What is it?" So that's why we're here today, just to tell you what we do and what we want to do to help. Next, thank you. We incorporated, as I said, 4 years ago in 2014, and at that time, there were 5 people who got together for lunch at the Virginia Cafe, and we decided that we wanted to do something to better the lives of the animals that were being sent into the shelter. So we do provide a support system for the shelter. It is our belief that every animal's life has value, deserves respect, and protection in a safe, caring, and healthy environment. Some of our, wrong one. Okay. Our mission, that's what I just said, isn't it? Yeah. Those are pictures of a couple of goats that we've had at the shelter. Melissa, a little beagle who has been adopted, and JT, a little kitty cat who has yet to be adopted. Our accomplishments. To date, that's in 4 years that we've been functioning, we have spent over $200,000 on medical needs for the animals. Every animal that comes into the shelter that is adoptable gets spayed, neutered, is up to date on vaccinations, and heartworm treatments. Unfortunately, about 60% of the dogs that come into the shelter have heartworm. And if you're familiar with dogs and heartworm at all, that's a horrible thing. So we do treat that. We have gathered support of volunteers who walk dogs, who foster kittens or cats in preparation for their forever homes. If you look at the screen, you see one dog, Irene, who came into us in December of 15, skin and bones, just so emaciated. Her 4 months later, there's another picture of her healthy and ready to go for her forever home. The third picture is Sugar, and Sugar is at an event at Tractor Supply in Gloucester where we go for to promote adoptions, and she has been adopted. We have done newspaper articles, advertising in newspapers. We've done open houses at the shelter. We have booths at farmers markets in Urbana and Deltaville. Pictures there. We had a Christmas food donation fund run by a local teenager, and Sona Bank we had a booth at Sona Bank to raise awareness. We participated in the Christmas parade and the dog walk in Urbana. We have increased from the 5 people that met back in 2014 talking about how we could help. We have increased our supporters from those 5 people to almost 800 people countywide. We do fund and continue to fund 5 transports annually. We take a cargo van with crates, and we go to Vermont as well as Maine. We do transports to Northern Virginia as well. We spearheaded and funded the building of a dog park, which I'm sure you're familiar with, and if not, and you have a dog, it's a lot of fun for them. We have a group of people who come almost on a daily basis around 4 o'clock. It's like their little cocktail hour while the dogs run around and play. We have a website that is maintained and a Facebook page to promote adoptions, awareness, and donations. The challenges that we face continue to raise funds to meet the medical needs and general care needs of the animals. We really need to increase our network of foster homes, especially if we get in a pregnant dog or puppies that are better off in a private home temporarily than they are in the shelter, as well as for kittens and cats. We continue to maintain and beautify the dog park, and we want to increase our local business support. Many of the local businesses have been very generous to us and have supported us with awareness kinds of things. Again, we want to increase our volunteer base and our outreach to different rescue groups, both in New England and in Northern Virginia. And we continue to want to raise funds and obtain grants. That's an area that we can use some help in, if anybody is a grant writer. And on the last page, there are our members. I am president. Deb Bryant is treasurer, Jeannie Murphy secretary, Ruth Williams, Amanda Spiller, and Maggie Gertz are board members. And we also have an advisory membership, the Vivian Dwyer, Janet Gauthier, Sarah Jones, Colleen Bednarczyk, Megan Brockman, Scott Kaufman, John Tomlin, and Peggy Doss. And in closing, the one major fundraiser that we have coming up is the Low Country Boil. Last year it was a great success. I think this year, since last year was the first year we did it, we know what we're doing this year, and we hope it'll be even more of a success. And I have a little flyer to give you to,
Thank you.
and hopefully folks in the audience will be able to come as well. You got it? All right. Anybody want tickets? Yeah? Jade will be there. Oops. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Ogden. All right, then we'll resume our normal order, and I believe Jay Dano is here from Hampton Road Sanitation District to give us a sewer project update.
I'm series.
Welcome.
It's PDF.
PDF, yeah, that's right.
Are you going to scroll for me, Matt?
I can't.
Okay,
Or
great.
If you click, it should. Yep.
Good afternoon, members of the board and county administrators. Thank you for the opportunity to speak about how HRSD plans to partner with Middlesex to provide wastewater service and ultimately eliminate the discharges by the Central Middlesex plant and the Urbana plant into Urbana Creek. Mr. Walker asked that I provide an overview of how HRSD plans on providing both short-term and long-term wastewater service looking forward. I'd like to start with just a brief overview of HRSD and then talk about the 2 projects that are currently underway, and then followed on by the long-term vision for the next 5 to 8 years and what we recommend is the best course of action. My name's John J. Dano. I'm the Chief of Planning and Analysis for HRSD. I work in our engineering department. All right, a brief overview. HRSD serves about 1.7 million people. We provide regional wastewater service for 20% of the population of Virginia. We cover about 3,000 square miles, treat about 150 million gallons per day of wastewater, and we have over 500 miles of pipelines, anywhere from 6-inch to 66 inches in diameter. We have about 850 employees and service about 466,000 accounts. What we do every day is protect public health and the waters of Hampton Roads by treating wastewater effectively. That is our day-to-day, day in and day out mission. Our long-term vision is that future generations will inherit clean waterways and be able to keep them clean. And be able to keep them clean is very important to us, and it has significant meaning. It means that we do our work in an economically sustainable manner. And we do this by managing risk and looking at the life cycle cost of providing these services. So, with a little background on HRSD, I'd like to transition into how we provide wastewater service in Middlesex County looking forward. And I thought I'd start with an excerpt from an existing agreement, this memorandum of agreement between HRSD and Middlesex County for cost sharing of sewer system projects. And it reads, this MOA for cost sharing of sewer collection system projects defines the responsibilities of HRSD and the county, and specifically related to study, design, construction of sanitary sewer collection systems within Middlesex County to be connected to HRSD interceptor and treatment facilities. And this was executed back in 2017, and it sets the stage for the couple projects I'd like to focus on right now. And the first one being the Cook's Corner collection system. And on this diagram, the orange outline depicts the limits of the sewer service area that we're planning for the Cook's Corner area. The project includes installation of about 3,200 feet of gravity sewer collection system, 1,100 feet of force main, and a pump station. The estimated cost for that project is $1.3 million, and this would be funded by Middlesex County. The schedule is it's currently under design. We look to go to construction late spring and complete the project by the summer of 2020. Along with that project, the important thing is that we understand that Middlesex County has secured grant funding for the revitalization of Cook's Corner, both the Vibrant Communities Initiative grant and the Industrial Revitalization Fund grant. And we understand that there's some time constraints there, and we need to provide sanitary sewer service as part of the grant requirements. So this first phase of the Cook's Corner gravity system will provide the collection system. Once we collect the sewage, we need to take it somewhere and treat it. And so the second project I'd like to talk about is the Middlesex Interceptor that will provide conveyance of that sewage from Cook's Corner up to the central Middlesex plant located a couple blocks behind us here. And that entails about a 2-mile force main that's depicted in red on this map that will take the flow, the wastewater from Cook's Corner to the treatment plant to be treated. So our current cost estimate for that project is $2.1 million, and that will be funded by HRSD. The schedule, that project is also under design, and we're looking to construct them simultaneously so that when the collection system's ready to take flows, we'll be able to convey the flow and treat it at the wastewater plant. Wanted to briefly touch on the Central Middlesex plant. This is a copy of our Virginia Pollution Discharge Elimination System permit for that plant. The monthly averages are depicted there. The plant's designed to accommodate 25,000 gallons per day of wastewater treatment under these limits of a carbonation BOD of 9 milligrams per liter, total suspended solids of 11 milligrams per liter, and a TKN of 3 milligrams per liter. This December 2018 effluent summary highlighted is the Central Middlesex numbers. And the first column depicts the flow that we're currently seeing, and that's in line with what we see on an annual average, which is about 10,000 gallons per day is what the plant is currently treating. We can see that our BOD is less than 2, our total suspended solids is less than 1, And looking at, it's not included because we sample TKN on a quarterly basis, but the last sample taken was 0.73 milligrams per liter, so much below what we're permitted to discharge. Likewise, this is a summary of last year's flows for Central Middlesex, and both our yearly average number was 11,000 gallons per day, and our fiscal year average was 10,000 gallons per day. So the point there is that the plant has excess capacity to treat more sewage. So for the short term, this is a good solution to provide the wastewater treatment needed to meet the grant requirements to get Cook's Corner served. So, but it also does another thing for us, and I mentioned we look at the life cycle costs and trying to do the right thing. So this is an overview map of what we project doing for Middlesex County for the long term. And the green line is phase 1, and you can see that it connects Cook's Corner to Central Middlesex and Saluda here. The red dots represent where we have 2 existing wastewater treatment plants. And ultimately, when we build the blue line, which goes down the spine of Middlesex County and connects over across the Pianka tank, we'll be able to take all the wastewater flow and those discharges out of Urbana Creek and take them to one of our larger wastewater treatment plants, our York River treatment plant. So I just wanted to talk about why we believe this is the best option, and we look at the life cycle cost. And this graph depicts it well, the economies of scale that we receive. The average unit cost for our large wastewater treatment plants to provide treatment is about $1.14 per 1,000 gallons treated, whereas the average for our small communities treatment plants is about $18 per 1,000 gallons treated. So over the life of the treatment works, it's very expensive to run small plants. So I'll start, so I ran a quick economic scenario model here, and I want to start off by acknowledging that all models are wrong. Some models are useful. Statistician George Box said that, but models are useful. And if I could just take you through this quickly, on the left side, I looked at what is the interceptor force main recommendation, and even at a capital cost of $35 million, if we're treating 200,000 gallons per day at that $18 per 1,000 gallons treated, and an interest rate of 3% over 30 years, the present worth is about $38 million. Versus if we looked at a decentralized treatment option, assuming about $10 million capital cost for wastewater treatment facilities per 100,000 gallons, would give us $20 million capital cost at, and I think I misspoke, at $2 per gallon treated for the interceptor force main, versus at the $18 per 1,000 gallons for the decentralized treatment. Over 30 years, with those same economic assumptions, we're looking at $46 million. So it behooves us to make a smart long-term decision here. And what I'd like to point out, we could discuss all of the numbers, but I very much underestimated the long-term gallons treated, and the more gallons that we treat that come from Middlesex, the more skewed those numbers get to favor the interceptor option.
Jay, can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
At this point? Is that okay?
Sure.
When you put these assumptions together, are you talking about just the distribution component, or?
Speak up.
I'm coming. Are you talking just about the distribution portion, or are you also talking about the decentralized plants? When you're running this analysis?
I'm running this analysis on the conveyance and the treatment, not on the collection system, if that's what you're...
That's what I'm asking.
Okay. All right, so moving on. This slide didn't quite come out the way it did since it's not a PowerPoint, but we have a revenue policy, and the guiding principles of that policy are that we charge a uniform rate to all of our accounts across the district. And that means that we collect facility charges when we build new facilities for new accounts for capacity consumed, and then we charge a uniform rate for treatment that we provide month over month, and that's based on the water meter usage usually. And our revenue policy supports our annually published rate schedule, and this is a copy of our rate schedule. I mentioned that there's two components, a one-time upfront facility charge, and that's what this slide depicts, and that's a charge for all connections prior to the issuance of a building permit by the local jurisdiction. The facility charge shall be due and payable prior to the renewal or reissuance of a building permit, except in where applicable facility charge is paid, except in cases where the applicable facility charge was paid when the building permit was originally issued. And I have it, the green arrow there depicts what a normal single residential family home unit would pay, which would have a 5/8 inch water meter, which is about $1,900. It's important, I pointed out to Matt earlier that we waive that fee for people that are converting from septic tanks to the HRSD system. So people that are currently on septic tanks that choose to connect to our system will not be paying that facility charge. New construction would. Then the other part of the rate is the monthly rate that people are paid based on water usage for the treatment, the month in and month out treatment. And that's outlined in our rate schedule, and we can see that Urbana pays about $14.84 per 1,000 gallons treated. So I'll be working with Matt on what that would look like for the greater Middlesex County. It will be no greater than that. It will be likely be closer to the $12.71 because that doesn't have a capital recovery portion built in because Middlesex will be building the collection systems. So another thing that I wanted to talk about was controlling development. HRSD is not in the business of development. We're here to provide wastewater service. So these bullets outline that we provide wastewater conveyance and treatment. It's up to our local jurisdictions to control zoning, identify potential sewer service areas. The Water Authority controls where public water is available, and that's a requirement before we extend sanitary sewer service. And ultimately, Middlesex County controls development where they want to see development happen. HRSD just provides wastewater interceptor conveyance and treatment for service areas identified. So going back one more time to the existing agreement, I mentioned that this is really for the design, the study, design, and construction of sanitary sewer collection facilities. What my ask is here today is that we move forward with executing a sewer service agreement that outlines the details of sanitary sewer ownership, operation, maintenance, repair, and replacement for decades to come. And it's incumbent upon HRSD to put aside the funds once these systems are originally built to replace them, including the collection system, as we look forward in time. So with that, I'd love to field any questions or provide some clarification where needed.
Yeah, John, could you please elaborate a little bit on the cost comparison? I think it was like slide 16 or 17 between the drip dispersal and...
There it is.
There we go. Can you tell us what contributes to this difference, $18 per 1,000 versus $2 per 1,000 gallons treated? Why the decentralized is so much more expensive?
Sure. I think this graph it's about the economy of scale, and the reason that the small communities are so much more is that these are both fixed and variable costs associated with providing treatment, and the labor is a fixed unit cost. And at our large treatment plants, we have fewer operators per gallon treated. So it takes almost as much manpower to run a small treatment plant as it does a large treatment plant. So when we can treat 10 million gallons per day versus 10,000 gallons per day, but still have the same general number of man hours in there, it quickly, and I'm not saying a 10 MGD plant will take more people, but per gallon treated, it's much less.
Okay, so that's, what, $16 per 1,000 gallons for mostly personnel? Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that for the long-term maintenance and operation of it. That's what we have a rate consultant that's been studying this for the past 10 years, and these are the numbers he's derived based on what we've been operating at our small communities treatment plants.
Okay, so the plants themselves have equivalent durability or longevity once they're constructed?
They can be built to the same standards, yes.
Okay, and do you have a formula for how many staff you need per X number of gallons of wastewater?
I don't have that handy. I can certainly look into that.
Is that the way you figure it, though? Is it based kind of on the volume?
It's not, it's based on how many are needed to operate the plant, and that's what I guess I was getting at. A large plant with a control room, and a single person can monitor most of those operations. If there's 1 tank or 10 tanks, they're still monitoring the process the same way.
So the smaller plants need constant monitoring?
Yes, much like, just as the larger plants do.
Like constant all day, every day, or constant once a day type of?
It depends on the size, but, and I want to say under 40,000 gallons per day, it would be less man-hours required by regulation. But once we're getting into these flows and the projected flows that we're seeing from the feasibility studies, we're not looking at less than 40,000 gallons per day. We're looking at, 100,000 or, right now Urbana's rated at 100,000 gallons per day, and we're running out of capacity there. So we're looking to go larger.
Okay, and do you figure in, is there a difference in, figured in that calculation for cost of compliance? For example, with environmental regulations, does it cost more to have, 5 small plants comply versus 1 larger? Is that part of it or not?
It gets factored in, but not, let's see. That's man-hours required to comply. And what we're looking at now is one of the biggest risks that we face as an organization is the ratcheting down of discharge limits, which requires more capital investment, more automation, and more personnel to try to discharge water at lower concentrations of the constituents of concern. So as the process gets more advanced, it requires more time and monitoring equipment to try to operate it in that finer margin.
Okay. Do you operate any drip dispersal small-scale systems?
We have a drip dispersal system at Mount Olive, but we don't operate it. We pump and haul that to treat it at one of our other plants.
So then it's not drip dispersal?
It was designed for that, but it's not being operated that way.
At Mount Olive, Virginia?
King William, yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
In these 2 slides, you're not actually comparing to drip dispersal. You're comparing to small plants like the one in Urbana and Saluda.
Right. So I didn't even really get into the drip dispersal, but
Decent. I'm sorry. I was making that assumption. I got it.
but the level of treatment required for both, the effluent that we have to reduce before we either discharge it into a creek or discharge it into the ground.
To me, it's the same thing that's happening, forgive me here, but with broadband. There's not really a private entity that wants to get into this business because it's not a great business to be in. It's very
I
similar.
agree with what you're saying. It's not a great business to be in. I mean, from an pure economics point of view.
Jay, I'd like to ask you, what is the cost on maintaining a drip dispersal?
I don't know the answer, Pete.
Would you believe what I was told, that they don't need an operator?
No. Not at the scale that we're talking about. And I would believe that we still have to provide treatment, and the treatment process still needs an operator.
Well, what is the treatment in a drip dispersal?
It would be similar to what we'd be looking at for a decentralized plant.
I've been told that they don't have, I'm talking about probably a 25,000 gallon per day plant.
Okay.
I don't even want to call it a plant. It's a 20 by 20 shed
Right.
and a couple of tanks underground.
We've-
And the only chemical addition that they do is chlorine to make sure that the underground piping doesn't
Clog up.
doesn't clog up.
Mhm.
And they do rinse that once a day. But all this is done automatically. Obviously, you do need somebody to go on by every now and then. And secondly, if there is an alarm or if something does go wrong, there's now a cell phone. So they don't have any, they don't normally have an operator for a 25,000 gallon per day.
I would agree for a 25,000 gallon per day. But I guess our challenge here is, as we've done these feasibility studies, the flows we're projecting are much more than that, and we're not going to have the small systems there as we look forward in time. I think that's where our...
Except in a rural community, you don't have many places. For instance, Urbana, which does take the 100,000 gallon right now, you could break it up into different segments and keep it under 25,000 gallons. So you could have 4 25,000 gallons, and that would require 5 acres worth each one. Each plant would, each plant would only require 3 acres of land to dispose of it in. For a rural community, it seems that a drip dispersal system is a lot better way to go to Pete Mansfield than to go to pump 40 miles to Yorktown, for instance. I think it's a lot easier to pour some liquid down the hole than to pump it 40 miles.
Right. Okay.
But you do agree that it wouldn't take a person, and it wouldn't be $18 charge.
I agree with that.
Jay, was it difficult for HRSD to come to the conclusion that the interceptor main was the right? I mean, that happened at some point. We made a design, or you made a design decision that this really should be an interceptor main. Was that a difficult evolution, or did you guys sort of have an aha moment?
It's a very difficult to come to that conclusion, in that there's not an easy answer for the projected flows. And if we want to take flow away from Urbana Creek, right now we're pushing the 100,000 gallons per day, and there's, I know of desire for more capacity there. So it's a challenge. You said it best earlier, that it's not people aren't competing to try to come in and steal this business. It's a lot of capital cost. That's why I wanted to point out that the way our revenue policy's written, it spreads the costs across all of our ratepayers, where have more dense populations are paying the same fees and not getting the same capital investment. So, yeah, it's a tough pill to swallow.
That's the part that jumped off the page to me when Matt was presenting it to us. He zoomed out on the map, and you look at Little Middlesex at the end of your service district. We're the hardest one for you to serve.
Yeah.
And you're tying into existing infrastructure where you have that opportunity. But not only geographically are we far away from where your treatment facilities are, we're actually sharing your customers, or they're sharing our project, basically. Yeah. And I just, for my own part, my own 20 cents out of this, I couldn't be more excited at the prospects of getting this done, and I hope you'll be coming back frequently to update us on project progress, especially Cook's Corner here in the near term.
May I bring up one other point, Jay?
Sure.
I haven't been in, I am certainly no expert in this area, but I asked the people from Manassas that produce the drip irrigation system what it would cost us for 25,000 gallon per day. I don't want to use the word plant, but I will,
Okay.
lack of a better word. They're telling me it's under $200,000.
Okay.
How much does it cost you to build 25,000 gallons per day? What did the Saluda plant cost you to make?
I don't have that number handy.
Quite a bit more than 200,000, I would imagine.
I would imagine also.
Would you say 3 million just for?
I don't want to speculate.
So you understand my thinking that if I can build a plant for $200,000
Yeah.
that will take 25,000 gallons per day, I could really compete with you.
Yeah.
For Middlesex County, the cost to us is this collection system. And yet, it seems like to me that we are going to be paying for the collection system, which is the gigantic cost. And you all are really being paid for it. You're collecting the $54 a month per homeowner. Why would Middlesex County not get some of that $54 per month at least, since we're paying the biggest share?
The way we're going to be providing, we're going to own and operate that system and provide the long-term operation and maintenance. We're going to have the guys going out there when there's a blockage or when there's an issue. We're going to be responding when the customer calls. We're going to be providing the conveyance and the treatment of that wastewater.
And you think that's worth $600 per year per home?
I do.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Any other questions, comments?
I am curious on project updates for Cook's Corner. Obviously, there's community interest in that project. How will you be updating us beyond just keeping the administrator apprised of progress or slips or anything like that?
How would you like to be
I mean,
apprised?
how often can we have you back up here?
We can have someone, what's the right frequency? I mean,
I'd like to
quarterly?
at least quarterly. I'd
Quarterly?
like someone from HRSD to come in and speak directly to us, and I promise you, I won't be drilling you on drip dispersion, but I will be drilling you on project and progress.
Sure, and I'd suggest that the project manager, his name's Jeremiah Burford, would be the right person, and I can certainly reach out.
I think
and-
quarterly for now, and if he thinks that's unreasonable, he can make a case against it. It's just for us, this is the
Right.
biggest thing that we've got going.
Okay.
This water and broadband are all going on at the same time. They're huge for us, and they're all reliant on each other.
Right.
We can't afford to slip. This is transformational to our community.
What was that word again?
Y'all use it every meeting. I will ask one question, Jay,
Sure.
and I think this is probably very important for some members in our audience to hear, since we have a good group here tonight. When folks in Middlesex see a very robust and dynamic project like this, we got the first leg of it, which is this small teeny piece right here between Cook's Corner and Saluda. They worry if this is pie in the sky, or is this really going to happen?
Okay.
What is the likelihood that Hampton Road Sanitation District would not move forward with that interceptor main. In 5 to 8 years is what the plan would be.
Very low. We've programmed it into our fiscal year 20 CIP. We've gone through our first CIP review meeting. It had support, and everyone realizes the need, and we think it's a good plan. We use the pipeline one way for the short term and then turn it around and take that plan offline, improve local water quality, and have a long-term solution. So we have support.
Well, the ultimate goal is to take Urbana offline, take Saluda offline, basically turn them into pump stations and pump it to the Matthews Force Main.
That's right.
And just acknowledging the obvious, there are really 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, potentially 10 service areas served by that one interceptor main in some fashion. I just wanted the people in the audience to hear that. And one other thing that's worth repeating. Did I hear you right in to say that if you're currently on a drain field and you connect to sewer, when this project's turned on and made available to the general citizenry, in service areas, of course, that you waive the $1,800 fee and they can connect essentially for free to the system?
Yes, so
Facility.
single-family homes, the idea is that in lots of places that are served by septic, we want to incentivize people connecting to improve local water quality, so the facility charge, that one-time fee, is waived for folks that are currently on septic tanks.
And that's for residential?
That's
not
for
commercial.
residential,
Commercial
that's
would have connection fees. I just wanted to make sure that I heard that right, and it definitely, anytime we hear something free in Middlesex, we like to repeat that and hear it often, because we don't hear that very often, especially not from the state or in budget year. So a typical residential home along the route within a service area that's currently on drain field, when it comes through, they want to connect, they have no facility charge to Hampton Road Sanitation District.
That's right.
Very good.
Jay, a question on water quality. The effluent that's going into Urbana Creek now, that if this goes through, could be increased within the permit that is in place now for the short term until the interceptor main gets
Turn the other way, right?
the quality of the effluent compared to the quality of the water in the creek before any effluent is introduced, and comparing that to rainwater runoff. There's a lot of angst about the nutrient load and the this, that, and the other. Can you address the water quality of the treated effluent that goes into the creek as it would compare to the existing creek water and/or stormwater runoff?
I don't have those numbers in front of me. What I did share was our last summary report, and I'm looking right now at our effluent summary for January for Central Middlesex. The flow is 8,000 gallons per day. The BOD was less than 2 milligrams per liter, and I want to say, I don't remember what we said the permit limit was.
Well, my intuition tells me that the water that's being put in the creek is cleaner than what's there.
I wouldn't be surprised by
fair?
that.
Okay.
Yeah, and
That was where I was trying to.
yeah.
May I? By the way, I really disagree with the statement that you just made. I made a calculation based on the numbers that you have here. Over the next 8 years, the Urbana plant and combined with the Saluda plant, and I don't have all the numbers, but I can tell you that would be equal to 2,000 80-pound bags of 10% nitrogen, 3% phosphorus fertilizer from the numbers that you have here. 2,000 bags. And to tell me that I can pour 2,000 bags of fertilizer in the creek without getting... When you talk about water quality, I think you're talking about clarity. And I agree with you, the water coming from your Urbana plant and the Saluda plant is a lot clearer than it is in the creek after a rain. But what makes it not clear is not nitrogen, phosphorus, CBOD, and others, sir. I really don't like the use of the word it's cleaner than, because that's just not so, sir.
To be clear, Pete, you must be ecstatic then that we're talking about taking that plant offline eventually by going to the...
I am.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure we were on the same page.
I only wish it would be in 2 years rather than 8. And I think it could be if we considered another route.
Any other questions, comments?
Yes, can you clarify what you mean by the other route, sir? Because I'm not sure I understand.
Bambos with HRSD.
Okay.
You may want to introduce.
Sir, with HRSD, would you like to come forward? Tell
Good
all these
afternoon. My
facts.
name is Pambo Sirlamsa. I work for Jay Dana with HRSD. And I'm just trying to understand your concern so that we make sure that we address it correctly. But what Jay is proposing, basically what we're proposing is taking off all the existing treatment plants and without expanding any other treatment plant, which the York River has available capacity right now, we're going to divert all the flow back to York River. So therefore, you don't have any effluent discharge into your creeks. So the alternative route that you're speaking of, could you clarify what you mean by that? If there's a better route or better way?
I'd be glad to do that. If it were Pete Mansfield, you know, you understand this is Pete Mansfield, not Middlesex County speaking. I would take Cook's Corner, which is probably only going to give you 3,000 or 4,000 gallons per day, and I would take them to something just a little bit bigger than a regular old sewage the disposal that I have, which is a septic tank called drip dispersion. At that point, it would go into one acre of land, and as we talked about, it doesn't take an operator to take care of it. That could be done one hell of a lot faster than the 2 years that it's going to take you to do it, to pump it down to the Saluda plant. I would then come back to you all and say, you know, it's time for you to get the wastewater out of Urbana Creek, and I think you've got a wonderful idea about pumping it to Yorktown. Go ahead and pump it to Yorktown. Why is that going to take you 8 years to do that?
Well, we have to program into our CIP, and as Jay explained earlier, I mean, we have to budget, and I don't know the total cost of that project, but it's anywhere from $20–30 million. And as he mentioned earlier, we already proposed the project into the 20 budget. It looks very favorable, gets a lot of support. So there is a process in order to build the line from all the way Urbana down to the York River plant. We're planning anywhere from 5 to 8 years for completion. I mean, we're going to start design probably in the next couple of years, and we're going to go through the design phase, and then we're going to start building the interceptor fairly quickly once we get the design completed to take the flow back to the York River plant. But we're giving you 5 to 8 years. We're trying to be conservative. We don't want to say 2 or 3 or 5 years, but 5 to 8 years is a reasonable amount of time for us to get the project from a PR to design, construction, and delivery.
That's why we are proposing for the Cook's Corner, we're gonna convey the flow back to Central Middlesex on a temporary basis. Once we get the force main in the ground, then we're gonna revert that flow back into the York River plant.
Okay, but you agree with me that I could take.
Absolutely.
Wait.
If you look at the small area, the initial phase of the Cook's Corner in isolation, and you say, okay, we're going to put this decentralized system here, it may work. But we're talking about 7, 8 service areas that we've been working with Matt to identify where the services are needed. And when you look at it from a larger scale, then the force main makes a lot more sense because these smaller plans, they become a headache for us to over time. And remember, we're going to be here in perpetuity. So managing these little plans, it becomes a lot more headache than maintaining a force main, which goes into a treatment plant that we already have the capacity. We don't have to get any other permitting. It's already there. So because expanding the treatment plant, either the Urbana or the Central Middlesex, the cost to expand those plants, it goes into millions. And that's where the difference comes in. So when we were comparing the cost earlier, it's strictly looking at the force main cost versus decentralized systems. If we included permitting for treatment plants and all the new treatment plant, then the cost would be much more. But we have the treatment already, capacity.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, and I'll set something up with Jeremiah.
Very good. We'll schedule that on our next conference call.
Great.
Thanks, Jay.
Thank
Thank
you.
very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'll introduce you to Tom Chiliminell with our local newspaper. He's waiting for you in the hallway.
All right, next on the agenda, we have Mr. John McCalmont with Parish and Partners to give us an update on the airport feasibility study.
Yes, good afternoon. Good to see you again, Mr. Chairman, members of the board and staff. Probably remember I was here, I guess, about a year ago or so when we were kicking this thing off, and now the reports have basically been prepared and submitted to the staff, and what we want to do now is the airport committee has looked through and reviewed, and they're ready to push it off to the state for the state to review. So upon your concurrence, that's what I believe their next step would be. So what I'll do is just highlight a couple of the aspects of the reports that were prepared and try to give a general basis and maybe answer any brief questions or whatever that may come up, and then we can move forward from there. So, how does this work? Oh, okay. So overall, the objective of this is basically to expand the runway. That was goal number one. In order to figure out how to prepare plans and whatever to study what it's going to take to do that, we asked the state to assist in some funding. So the state requested that we prepare these two reports. These were not the request of the staff and not the objective of the county, really, to move forward. So this is part of getting some information that's useful and part of more that was a requirement that was put on us by the state. So the first one is the feasibility study, which again, the goal was to find out what is it going to cost to expand and lengthen the runway to make it safer and meet current standards. So in this presentation, I'll go through a couple of the considerations and then a few of the concepts that were developed. The next one was the DOAV, which is Division of Aviation in Virginia, basically the aviation committee at the state level that reviews and funds all this work. The intent of this report for a role change is the state classifies each airport in various roles. I think I mentioned that before. So the intent is to see what will it take, or is it even possible, to increase the role of Hummel Field to the next classification up. So in this objective, I'll just go through a couple of the data points and then summarize a couple of the findings. So generally speaking, when you study any airport from a planning perspective, you have to consider a service area. That is literally all this is. This is just standard verbatim stuff from any airport planning work, and essentially what the airport service area is, as it shows up there, if you can read it, it's essentially a 20 nautical mile radius of the airport or a 30-minute drive. that's what the different colors and whatnot are. Now, the FAA has a little bit larger radius. They go to 30 nautical miles. That's why the blue is shown there. And part of what we were required to do again by the state on this report is to incorporate in some of the FAA requirements in addition to the state level requirements. So that's why you'll see some of that nomenclature there for FAA and state. So here is the current land use, and this was pulled from GIS information from a couple years ago. So I'm already aware that I believe there's some property right in through here that may or may not be reflected exactly the way it is today after some property acquisitions.
Yep.
However, the general premise of what's going on at the airport and the airport property is basically shown. So the area where we're looking for the expansion is out here, is that over here you have highway essentially, and then you have another area off to the north that is potentially an opportunity for expansion. So that's what was looked at. So one thing to evaluate is runway length. That was objective number one. Two criteria, one being DOAVs, the state's level criteria for their current local service classification or role of the airport. It's essentially just to leave and maintain the existing length, or 2,000 feet. So by that current standard, it's generally compliant in that sense. And then from an FAA perspective, that's this graph over on the right side of the page. Over here, this is directly from the FAA's advisory circular that tells you what the standard runway length will be. And all this takes into account is the mean daily temperature, mean daily maximum temperature. So you put that in there, shoot it up to the elevation of the field, and then you go over and you find out the length. In this case, simply based on that, 3,100 feet comes up as a standard FAA length. So, and that's for, the majority of the fleet at the airport being 95%. So it just means they're.
Chairman, not disrespect anything, can you go back to that other frame that you have up there? My name's Scott Jones, I live in Top.
To this one?
There we go.
Okay.
If you kind of look to the right-hand corner of that map, that's over 500 campers right there. One plane goes down into that campground, how many people are going to be affected with over 500 campers?
Thank you, sir, but we don't have dialogue during this part of the meeting, but I thank you for your thoughts.
I've got to leave, my mom, I got to get home.
So this basically just shows the two differences for the runway length. Current length meets local service standards for DOAV, and if you were to try to meet FAA standards, which you'll see later on as one of the objectives, it would be closer to 3,100 feet. So that's what we're kind of working towards in this. To do that, there's two concepts: extend the runway where it is, or realign it slightly to try to obtain the length that way. And we went through a couple diagrams that show this to show these two options. This first one on concept one is using FAA standards, and this is both for the runway width and the safety area. The safety area is the area off the end of the runway. You can see it diagrammed in red on the north side of the airfield, proposed airfield. That's, again, a standard safety area dimension that's given by the FAA. And then 60 feet is the FAA standard runway length. Applying both of those factors provides approximately 3,149 feet of runway. So in a sense, it could potentially meet the FAA standards somewhat. And then using DOAV standards, you get a little bit longer runway length just by the mere fact that their safety area dimensions are a little bit less. I have no specific reason why they're less. That's just their standard. That's what they came up with. So the runway extension option, and again, I don't want to get into at this point the viability of each option. This is just another option. So again, it's providing an extension to the existing runway, not realigning the current configuration. And again, with both the FAA safety area and the DOAV safety area, and you can see by these diagrams that, again, the DOAV model is a little bit longer just because the safety area is a little smaller. So from these evaluations, we had those four options based on the two concepts. In trying to identify kind of a priority in a sense, created this chart of typical evaluation factors. You can see the list there, but they range anywhere from safety areas to approach surface impacts, project costs, all that type of things. And then we identified a 1 through 4, very simplistic, just give a number 4 if it's the highest, and a number 1 if it's the lowest of those 4 choices. From that, very easy to see the top number. And again, that's just a way to figure out some priority way. So in this case, concept 1, DOAV option, which is runway realignment, DOAV option is the highest scoring in this consideration. Another thing that the state required us to do, and this was it's a noise model. It's another standard FAA planning process that they go through. Honestly, we tried not to evaluate this because there's not a lot of data. And to truly get a good model of the noise, you need a lot more data and a lot more information to put into this. This is basic and gives a general depiction of what could be representative based on the conditions of what we had. So 65 decibels is noted to be the FAA's kind of typical noise impacts that they want to maintain within the airport area. That's why we modeled around 60 to 70 decibels from that. So we're showing the existing noise contours. This is also based on heavier traffic from the south. Then showing the extension model, what it would look like potentially. Again, a lot of factors with this. And then the rotation model. You can see it kind of shifts away from some of the properties, and actually that one of the positives of this kind of moves it away from some of that. So most of the important part, I guess, is project costs. And again, these are very conceptual in nature at this point in time. But going through just the runway cost of realignment, so realign with FAA standards, you can see it's just over $2 million total project cost. And that does involve the engineering, construction, design, all the way through the construction and the planning services and the environmental and everything else that would go with that. So we are assuming this to be an all-inclusive for that, because there's going to be a lot of environmental work that would need to be done to move forward. The DOAV standards is just shy of $2 million, so you can see it's really just a matter of the size of the footprint of the runway. The extended runway option, you see these again are very close to about $1 million. Generally speaking, you see you put about half the pavement down, it's going to be about half the cost. So it's pretty straightforward, and it shows by this, but we had to have backup to show the numbers. So, so then funding, how do you fund it? Typical airport projects, you have local money, FAA money, and DOAV money. Standard practice for airport work. Here, it's not a NIPIUS airport, which means it's not in the FAA system. So there's no FAA money available, and I don't see that changing. Is there state money available? Potentially. There's some different aspects we can look for that, yes.
Can you close the loop for us a little bit on the FAA? Why aren't we a NIPI?
NIPIUS, yeah, it's National Plan of Integrated Airport Systems. So,
That's an acronym for you, right?
yeah.
Right.
And basically all it is the FAA takes all of the airports in the country and classifies them based on a lot of different factors. And Hummel Field is one of a number of airports that is non-classified. So that means that it doesn't classify to be a basic service, which is the lowest level airport. So it's considered unclassified. And you'll see also in a couple slides following this, there's a number of airports in Virginia that are also non-NIPIUS, and they're comparable. So that's why you have state systems that help back up some of the funding for these unclassified airports.
Would a realignment get us closer to being NIPIUS?
No, the NIPIUS part has a lot to do with location.
Okay.
And back on that previous slide, when we expanded to 30 nautical miles, we then encompass a lot more airports. And if you're within that range of other NIPIUS airports, especially air service, air carrier airports, the likelihood is very minimal.
I'm good, thank you.
Okay. So in here, so the funding source, we'd be looking at state opportunities. Other is kind of this thing hanging out on the side. That's another thing to always consider, because there's other grant possibilities. There's there's other options, and then local match. So just wanted to show this as just some of the, basically this just shows the two runways shown together in a sense to give you a visual image of kind of what we're looking at for the realignment. The big nice part of it is just to see that the approach surface then moves over the creek instead of up there over the homes and the properties that are just to the west. So gives
John,
it
that was a point that I wanted to make sure was made, that
Mhm.
I believe that Hummel Field is the second shortest runway in the Commonwealth. And realignment will put it into a much safer bearing, plus the flight path for approaches and departures will no longer be over those houses, which is what you were
Correct.
just hitting on. So it's a major safety consideration. If you look at the mishaps we've had at the airport in recent years,
Mhm.
most of them that weren't just direct pilot error were not enough runway.
Right. And a funny thing too, and this diagram shows again the two options and the realignment options just kind of side by side. But if you think about to your point about a shorter runway, if you get pilots and student pilots that come in, they're going to be flying low because they're going to want to hit that runway as soon as possible because they know they don't have very much. So you're going to be closer to these properties that are outside the area. And if they do try to land and can't make it because it's too short and they don't feel comfortable, they're going to go around and try it again. They're going to go around and try it again. So it being shorter means that, yeah, you may have the same amount of traffic overall, but they may go around 3 times, buzzing over your house, trying to feel like they're safe to land. You give them a little bit longer runway, they're going to feel more safe to land, and they'll be more apt to do once instead of a couple. It's probably the reality of how the flying works. So,
John, early on, one of the concerns some of the neighbors had expressed is jet traffic
Mhm.
and jet planes landing. The runway's not long enough for jet landings, even if it's extended or realigned and extended. Is that correct?
the intent of this is not to bring in jets. A standard jet length runway is 5,000 feet.
Okay.
That's the standard dimension for most jet runways. There are some jets out there that can operate at very short lengths. There's some military jets that can operate at very short stage lengths. So I can't say no, right? But that has no impact on what's happening here. So, I mean, someone may come up with the new Eclipse jet, the new Citation jet. They could potentially, but will they come to Hummel Field? Probably not. And they also, they rely, that's a different approach requirement. So they're going to need potentially different and better approaches to come in where the equipment can guide them in. And this facility doesn't have that type of approach. So at barely 3,000 feet, right, I don't see that happening. So again, the role change, that's the other report, and this was thrown on us as well as a request by the state to try to bring Hummel Field from a local service to a GA community, which basically what that does is opens up more opportunity for funding. That doesn't guarantee you more funding. That opens up an opportunity to be put in a line to try to compete for more funding. So it just gives you the opportunity for that. So to appease that, we wanted to go through a couple points from the state system plan, essentially, that Virginia put together a couple years ago. And all we wanted to do, because there's really no guideline for identifying how do you identify how to change the role of an airport. It's kind of a subjective matter, but there are a number of criteria that the state prepared in their system plan previously that said, if you meet this criteria, you can be in this classification or this role. So this is a map pulled directly from that, and you can, these are all the airports in the state. The blue, as you can kind of see, is the airports within, or an area within 30 minutes of a general aviation airport. So everything in blue is within 30 minutes of an existing general aviation airport. Everything in that kind of magenta, pink, orange, whatever colors you see, is within 45 minutes of a commercial service airport. So Hummel Field over here, you can see they're within all of that. So in a sense, it's tough to change anything for just standards. Like if they're sitting up here in Northern Neck that's showing some potential new areas, or in the center of the state over a little west of West Richmond, then that'd be an easy sell. You say, here's an opportunity. Where Hummel Field is, it's a little bit more challenging. So we wanted to go through the precise criteria that's in there and identify what they meet and how they don't meet. This is the comparable airports mentioned before. You see on the second to far right column says non-NIPIUS. That's the unclassified airports. These are existing Virginia airports that are also unclassified. And obviously it's for obvious reasons that these are considered comparable. But as you mentioned before, Mr. Chairman, that Hummel Field is 2167 runway length. Grundy, even though they're a GA and classified, they're 22. So shorter than Grundy, shorter than Shannon, shorter than a lot of the smaller airports out there. But this just has a couple of criteria. And then we wanted to go through, and in the report, it graphically identifies how much compliance there are to basic overall items. And of these, we got the standards, based aircraft, and operations. Because what happens at an airport? Do you meet current standards, yes or no? What are your operations and what are your based aircraft? That's kind of the big ticket things for airports. So we wanted to identify that. So this table is the comparison of that for, and the percentages aren't really as much of a matter of that. That's kind of a bar graph. So the further to the right, the more compliant it is in this sense, or the bigger the number is. Hummel Field is highlighted in the yellow. So you see the yellow bar, that's where Hummel Field fits with all this. So as you can see, this bottom section of the top graph is the local service airports. So of all local service airports in Virginia, based on the number of criteria in the book that they meet, they're at the top. You are at the top. So you're 82% compliant with all the criteria in the standards. And then just for non-NIPIUS airports, we threw that in down at the bottom just for reference from a FAA classification standpoint, just to see how that kind of works out. So this was it's a very promising number here. Number of based aircraft. Again, local service airports is the bottom part of this top section, and Hummel Field is the third highest in that entire list for based aircraft. 35 based aircraft upon the time this number was taken, which was I think a couple of years ago. But that's very, very good. So that was another one of the criteria. And then the last one that was looked at was the operations per day. And again, how busy is an airport? That's where you get your lifeblood from. That's why the airport exists, is for the operations. So this number here, 38, that's daily operations. That was based on counts that the FAA does, that the state does. They have an airport inspection annually. The state comes down and does this, and they audit it, and they find the numbers, and they have several sources to go through, but when this snapshot was taken, it was 38 operations. So going through to summarize those things in the report, and this is the last slide too, by the way. So in compliance with the current criteria, I found this very interesting. Local service average is 68.5. Hummel Field's 82%. So you can say you're very compliant and more compliant than most other airports in the local service category. The general aviation community role, which is what we're potentially trying to move up to, the average is 67.5%. Hummel Field is currently today, as it sits, 56% compliant with general aviation community criteria. And it is noted that there are airports that are less than that. But we found three fairly straightforward items that if these were undertaken, in a sense, say provide a courtesy car on the field or install reels, which were runway end identifier lights, they're not a very expensive thing. It's pulsating lights at the end of the runway that help identify for circling aircraft, and then extend the runway to where, standard safety area and standard safe runway length theoretically should be, then you'd be 68% compliant with general aviation community. So with only those three things, it would automatically be at that compliance to within the average of all general aviation community in the state.
What is the length of the FAA standard for runway?
3,100 feet.
3,100. So
Yes,
you
sir.
meet that with the
with the extensions, if we're able to go as far as we're hoping.
Behind the horse, isn't
If I mean, it appears that we'll be able to get to that point, yes, if, depending on safety area lengths and there's a lot of factors and rotation angle and whatnot, but then the last two things there, the based aircraft, it says local service average 25, general aviation community average is still less than 30. Humboldt Field has 35. So your airport has more based aircraft than most other airports out there for these two classifications, these two roles. Operations, you can see the numbers there, and again, that just shows that Humboldt Field is much more active than most of the other local service airports, and just about as active as an average general aviation community airport. So again, there is no position presented with these reports. This is just something to provide the state with data. Said, give us some information as to what we should consider, because I think some of this role change is subjective. So it would be subjective for the state to evaluate, should it be changed or not. We're just presenting the information and presenting a case, essentially. For the study, to identify the possibilities for extending the runway to a safe and longer runway length, which was the main objective. This just identifies options that, yes, it appears that it is possible. And for $1 to $2 million, providing everything goes through, it can go. Now, I will say that included in those costs is funding and budget available for design and planning and environmental services, which would need to be done because that wasn't done here. So there still needs to be done a full environmental assessment, and that wasn't included in this part of the work because the project's not started yet. But they will require an environmental assessment, which will evaluate the options and the impacts and the noise and the rotation angle and all the other impacts that we've kind of touched on. We've just kind of touched on what needs to be considered in a future study to give an idea of what it is, to try to get an idea of what the cost might be. So this is not a set in stone anything. This is a pre-study study, in a sense. But
And nothing for land acquisition.
and nothing for land acquisition. And that was another good point, because the airport doesn't own the property to the north. And it's been all said, but all but said that if there's not an opportunity to extend it, but there might be an opportunity to rotate it. It's been stated in other meetings. So that would be something else that have to be considered. And the cost of the land acquisition is not included in those costs, because that's a crystal ball that I don't have for that case. So this is more construction and typical cost. So again, anything that you are submitting, and again, I don't mean to belabor this, but if the board was to say, okay, it looks okay, let's give it to the state and let them review it, that doesn't mean you're committing to anything. You're not committing to an extension, you're not committing to a rotation, you're not committing to do any improvements whatsoever, and you're not committing to accepting to be a different role airport. You're just committing to say, yeah, the airport committee has prepared and gathered this information, and let's give it to the state to see what they think and see what they come back with. So, no money request, free.
Questions, comments?
So, just to clarify, if I understand correctly, there are funding implications, though, down the road. If, excuse me, this is pursued and a reclassification, the effect on the county is access. It's an opportunity
Yes.
to become eligible for funding for maintaining the safety or making improvements at the airport. Is that
The
correct?
key word for that is making improvements, yes. So as a local service airport, you can get funding assistance for some maintenance projects and some other things to basically just keep up the airport. Maintenance and some safety, but very limited. If you become general aviation community, then you're now eligible for airport improvement projects, which includes runway improvements, taxiways, buildings, all kinds of other opportunities. at an 80% level. So let's say in the best case scenario, if it wants to go that direction, you go to general aviation community and you're in line for this potentially $2 million project, Homewood Field would be 20% of that. And the state would cover the other 80%.
So moving it forward gives us options without committing us to any
Absolutely.
path.
Yes.
Okay, and just for clarification and for the record too, Mr. Perkinson talked about the diagram in your report about a possible realignment. And I think what you've said is, or what he mentioned is asking that the deviations from the proposed realignment option may be considered or will be considered. We're not at that design stage,
No.
but that can be in the record, that they will be considered. You'll consider all options at that stage with being mindful of the impact on both the west and the east side of the
Yes.
airport.
Yes, because I think before any, let's say you get down the road to a design level or to a real planning level, you need to identify where the true airport boundary is, and then actually get surveyed boundary property maps, find out what the noise implications might be, find out what the impacts at the creek edge or the water's edge will be, and how far back you need to come from that, from an environmental perspective, where those would be. And that will kind of identify as far over, let's say, to the east that you're able to rotate. So that, generally speaking, we wanted to show that there is an option to provide a longer runway, longer, safer runway with the approach going over the water, which clears potentially all those houses on the west side there. But there's nothing that says this is where it will go. And it's actually caveated that this is not a design and that a lot of further work will need to be done to identify the actual footprint.
John, I believe the state has really insisted that every possible angle is looked at in this, even though the only angle that's possible is the realignment, because the property owner that we need his cooperation is only going to go with that.
Right, right. And to be quite honest, I've had phone calls that say, don't even show it because it's not an option. I said, I have to show it.
Yeah.
You have to have an option. And the option is to extend it because the goal is to have a longer runway. Now, the other options don't do anything, but that doesn't get you towards your goal. So there's a shown option as required by FAA planning documents and state planning level. But as you said, from a land opportunity, it appears that the rotation at some angle, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10, whatever it may be, some angle is likely the only choice that could be perceived.
Other questions or comments? John, I want to thank you. You've been very
Yes, sir.
attentive to the committee and attentive to this body over keeping us updated on the study as it progresses. And,
Very welcome.
onward
Anything
and
else?
upward.
What's that?
Onward and upward.
Yeah, there we go. That's how airplanes fly.
All right, item F, VIPSA recycling, and I have to admit, I don't know Steve or Boudouin, so I'm not sure who's here. Nobody's here.
I don't see
All
Dutch.
right, well, I don't feel too bad about not knowing them. That report is in pages 166 through 187 in your board packet, addresses a number of questions and so on with regards to brush recycling and so on and so forth.
Mr. Chair, can we ask that the county administrator re-ask for Steve to come back out and talk to us about the recycling?
Absolutely.
I know he was traveling today, so I don't know whether he's got.
That's fine. I just think there is a fair amount going on in the recycling space, and it's impacting our VIPSA rates, and we need to hear from him.
Next up is the very patient Bruce DeSimone. Talk to us about the Middlesex Foundation and workforce housing.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I know you've had a long day, so I'll try to keep it extremely short. My board of directors instructed me to request from you an exemption of real estate taxes on the workforce housing project that we're working on, and also a waiver of the fees. and a refund of the 2 fees that we've already paid. I spent some time updating my pro forma, looking at, we've had some additional soft costs, but also looking at the, what we're dealing with alternative water system. And I calculated that during construction, if real estate taxes were waived, it would save us $6,100. I assumed $1 million of construction in the ground at 61 cents per hundred. I also took our total development cost and used the same 61 cents per hundred. And that would result in a savings of $22,451 a year in real estate taxes that we would have to pay. If we didn't have to pay those, basically it would reduce the rents by about $95 a month. And so, and just to give you a frame of reference, we're looking at rents that are about $165 a month more than what is being charged at Mercer Place, which is why we're really looking to try to minimize costs as much as possible.
I heard that right, $165 a month more
Yes.
than Mercer Place. Do you happen to know if they pay real estate tax on their development?
I'm not, I don't know the answer to that right offhand. And just on the fees side, for the zoning ordinance amendment, we paid $300. For the special exception, $350. Bay Design Group is in the process of preparing a major site plan application, which should go in by the end of the week, and we're expecting that'll cost $350. And I was unable to calculate what a building permit cost would be because there are multiple fees depending on different aspects of the plans. But that is my request,
Comment or a question? You know how I feel about this project. Okay. I'd never voiced this before, but I was sort of thinking one of the added benefits to the county would be converting non-taxpaying county property into taxpaying county property. And so that was just a little idea that I had in the back of my mind, which is not decisive in this. But I'd like to ask Matt, are there any other foundations or groups? In other words, if we do this for this project, are we getting on a slippery slope of, or is it this kind of a standalone?
I, like you, am very supportive of the workforce housing project, and I would be supportive of recommending the board consider waiving the fees commensurate to what we've done with Habitat for Humanity in the past. But the precedent we have, closest precedent to this we have is the Porttown Village in Urbana, and they do pay real estate taxes, and we did not exempt them. And therefore, I would recommend that we not honor the request for a real estate tax exemption, but honor the request for application and building fees to be paid.
As well as refund of fees already paid?
I think it's a few planning fees, isn't it, Bruce? Yes, sir.
Is it, I mean, do we have the right to waive?
I don't think you do without the General Assembly's concurrence. And I was gonna say, if you're gonna make a motion, let's look at it, let's pass it a month or two to let me or somebody look at it, because I don't think you can waive
real estate
taxes.
I was gonna say, I mean, with the Dillon rule being what it is, I don't know that we have that authority.
There is some authority that I'm aware of when Heather looked into a similar request several months back where the board can name 501c3s either tax exempt or non-tax exempt. I'll give you a case in point. I know the food bank is building a facility up on the Northern Neck, and they've asked for real estate tax exemptions under the 501c3 status. And I think it gives local jurisdiction to the boards. But we can look into it. In any event, even if you can, I would recommend you not. I just sat through a fairly long budget meeting, and we need all the revenue we can, no disrespect, Bruce. But the planning fees and building fees is something the board has waived for either ourselves or Habitat in the past. I think you're on safe ground with that.
I have a motion.
Just before you make that, Mike, your
My
county
sense-
attorney
My
in the last-
sense is that we need to look at it before you take any action.
Okay, so we probably shouldn't
affirmatively.
take action for or against.
Well, you
on
can
the
take
real-
action against if you want,
Against.
then there won't be anything to look at. But
Okay.
if you're considering it, then before you take action affirmatively, we need to look at it.
Understood. Your
I
motion.
move that we waive the fees, but we table addressing the tax exemption until county attorney has had a chance to opine.
We have a motion? And that's to refund the fees that are already paid?
Correct.
Also?
I'll second that.
Motion duly seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. So ordered.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bruce. Okay, I think we took care of everything in 4, and we're looking at Matt Walker for engineering services, scope of work, work order for Cook's Corner interim
Yes, sir.
water system.
I'm going to try to be very brief on this, but I'm going to pull up the work order if you give me one moment. I'll have that pulled up. The board may recall that the Cook's Corner Catalyst water system was engineered and designed several years ago to provide a catalyst water system to serve our county facilities on county-owned property in the Cook's Corner system. That was moving forward parallel to the proposed project in Deltaville that included a desalination plant and local source of water for Deltaville. When that project evolved into becoming what's now known as the Eastern Middlesex water system, the Cook's Corner Catalyst water system, which was partially deployed, was pretty much shelved and folded into the Eastern Middlesex water system. Given the recent recommendations from the USDA that we secure all of the easements needed before we go out to bid on the project for the Eastern Middlesex water system as a whole, it has become perhaps necessary to pull the Cook's Corner Catalyst water system back off the shelf and maybe bid that out separate and parallel to the Eastern Middlesex water system. We feel like we're fairly confident we're going to have our easements in place and have this Eastern Middlesex water system out to bid sometime between October, December, hopefully earlier if possible. But given commensurate projects in the area or comparable projects in the area, we feel like that would be a good time frame and a good, safe, conservative estimate on when we'll have the easements in place. In order to expedite the Cook's Corner system and allow or provide domestic water supply to the Cook's Corner complex across the road and finish the catalyst system, we would want, and it's my recommendation we do so, take the previously approved September 22nd, 2017 plans and move forward with that project independently and before we bid the Eastern Middlesex water system later this fall. This would ensure that the county can provide domestic water service not only to the Cook's Corner economic development project involving the brew pub, but also ensure that we provide domestic water flow for the workforce housing project across the road. The county has the money set aside for that project. We had just simply chosen to shelve it and wrap it into the Eastern Middlesex project. But with the delay in getting our easements in place and bidding that project, in an abundance of caution, it's my recommendation we pull that back out and bid that separately. And what this work order essentially does is prepare a very brief feasibility study to make sure the flows are commensurate with the need and get those plans bid and handle the construction aspects of the project.
Matt, in oversimplified terms, I seem to remember that the plan that we had and then put on the shelf to wait for the water to come through is not substantially different from what we were going to have to do when the water came through.
It's identical.
Identical.
Yeah,
Okay, so
it's basically the service lateral work on county's property.
Except for the difference in timing, the cost should be the same.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
The one aspect of the project that's not located on county property is when we bore under 33 and we come down 33 with a 12-inch main. But again, we had planned to do that anyway with the.
That's the way I had understood it.
Yes, sir.
Would you accept the motion?
Yes, sir.
I move that we authorize acceptance of the Cook's Corner interim water system scope of work and work order.
I'll second.
Been short of seconds on this side of the room today. Just don't want y'all to
It's
fall
been a
behind.
long day for everybody.
I'll
Okay,
second that.
we've got a motion and duly seconded. Is there any discussion?
I would just add, I think when we talked about this earlier with the water authority, I don't remember when the conversation was, but this is also an opportunity for the water authority to get into construction sooner than later and test that part of their body. I mean, they really have not been in construction yet, so to pull this in and be working on that sooner or nearer term, I think is just an added benefit.
Would the authority be involved in this part of it?
They would partner with us.
Okay,
And
okay.
I think when it goes out to bid, the engineer would be engaged to make sure that the system is, and it's designed to water authority standards, which are the Hampton Roads development standards.
Very good.
But they would be part of the project, if not leading it to some degree.
Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Hearing none, so ordered.
Just one final comment, Mr. Chairman, because my other Mr. Chairman is in the audience. It's not a slam on the water authority at all. It's just we had a very strong preference given us by the USDA that we bid the project out in its entirety. When we had started that project, we had thought we had talked about and thought that we would bid it out in phases. And the first phase would have technically been already out to bid right now. But the USDA stated a very strong preference that we bid the project out in its entirety in the component pieces like we had chosen to, and that's been the result of the delay.
And as much as I didn't care for that change, I see the wisdom in
I
doing
do
it that
too.
way. So,
Absolutely.
that's what we gotta live with.
Yep.
All right, Miss Betty Muncy on budget supplement requests, page 200 through 204.
And Mr. Chairman, if I may, not to interrupt Betty, but she has me down to speak to one, and I'd like to speak to that first while we're on the subject of the water authority. In 2018, budget year FY18, the board had approved and appropriated a $1 million loan for the water authority to move forward with the design. That loan was to be repaid at the time of closing of the loan with the USDA. We have needed those funds. We had already approved all the loan packages, the loan documents and everything. We had Sands Anderson come in and take care of all that for us. We did not need them in 2018. Therefore, those monies were carried forward into 2019, and that's what this appropriation resolution does, or supplement.
And on advice of council, since I sit on the water authority, I will abstain from the vote, but the chair will entertain the motion on moving forward with that $1 million loan.
It's actually already been approved in 2018, but only spent in 2019.
Oh, don't we have to approve it?
Yeah.
Okay.
You need a motion to appropriate the
Yes.
loan?
Is that the right word, appropriate?
You're appropriating the funds into this current year budget. They were in
To move
last
forward
year's
on what's
budget.
already been approved.
We're rolling them forward to this year.
I'll make a motion to appropriate.
Thank you,
the
ma'am.
loan account.
All right, got a second on the other side of the room finally. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign.
Now I will be quiet and let Betty have the floor.
Thank you. There's just a couple other ones. A supplement request number 34 is for Wings and Wheels. We went over budget with that project a little bit in the fall, and the Friends of Hummel Field are repaying the county back for those overages. So that's an in and out, $1,074. Then, number 37 has to do with the SAFER grant. I don't know if the board remembers that grant. It was a 5-year federal grant that was started in 2014. And the county did not spend all of the money that was appropriated to us by the federal government for that grant. So we have to pay back our unspent funds. So that's $52,309 that we are returning back to the federal government. Then number 38 is an emergency services grant, 2 grants actually that we
Sorry,
received.
Betty.
No? Yes.
The SAFER grant,
Mhm.
predates me, I think, by a bit. Can you speak to why we weren't able to spend the funds?
They actually were, it's supposed to be a reimbursable grant where we actually spend the money and then they reimburse us. But Chief Nugent, when he was here, had written into the project that we do, that certain goals were going to be met as far as web page development and some other things. I don't remember what else besides web page. Probably some training money and something like that.
And retention.
So there's no opportunity.
So we had a gap between when Chief Nugent left and when we got a replacement for him to be doing those activities.
Okay.
And so we did not spend them, and no, we could not carry them anymore.
Okay.
We had asked if we could spend them, and they closed it out.
Got it.
So we have to return that with interest, which there is no interest earned on that, so 52,000, that amount. So on to number 38, we have gotten in 2 grants for emergency services for a total of $8,200. Then number 39 is an in and out of state grant funds received for the 4 for Life grant funding for the rescue squad, $13,141. And those funds are required to go to just the one rescue squad because that's the only licensed squad that we have in the county.
I have a motion.
Yes, sir.
I move that we approve budget supplement requests FY 2019-34, 37, 38, and 39.
We have a motion.
I second.
Duly seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Hearing none, so ordered. All right, we got to item 6 last month, and our stand-in county attorney was in Aruba. So we had a full-time county attorney on maternity leave and a part-time county attorney in Aruba. So our stand-in, Mike Sobrick, is here. So you have anything to...
I don't have anything.
No report from Aruba?
All righty then, we'll move on to county administrator update.
I have a very brief update for the board. No written report this month, but we have been working on certain renovations to the old Commonwealth's Attorney's Office building at the Saluda Professional Center that the county recently acquired. We've had some discussions with one agency in particular about maybe potentially moving into the building. We haven't had final word that's going forward, so I don't want to name names, but we are moving forward parallel with a project to potentially move planning, building, and zoning down into the bottom of this building. So they're on the first floor. 90, I don't know, Pete, we looked at it one time, about 95 to 97% of the foot traffic we have upstairs on the second floor of the Woodward building are coming to see planning, building, zoning, or environmental enforcement. And that was some of the need or desire for having an elevator. Well, when the elevator project kind of dissipated, we looked at alternatives, and this was an alternative that we looked at, potentially moving building, planning, and zoning into what had been heretofore used as a record storage room. There's plenty of room down there for them. They'd be on the first floor. So we're moving forward with that project. We hope to have planning, building, and zoning potentially relocated into the downstairs of this building by July.
Very good. Did that wrap it all up? Wow. Okay. Unfinished and new business. Betty, did you need to clarify that budget request, the supplement request?
I don't think she likes my timeline.
Good luck on that one. Because Susan has
Susan staring daggers at me. You didn't like July, huh?
I must say, Susan has been putting in a lot of hours downstairs. There's a tremendous amount of work going through all of those files that are down there to make sure that we are compliant with the State Records Management Act. There are schedules and all kinds, each piece of paper has a different retention period, and whether it can be shredded or recycled. And So
Uh-uh.
I passed that project along to Susan when we interviewed her. That was the.
We warned her when we interviewed her, did we not?
We warned her.
And all kidding aside, I do have to say this, she has worked very hard down there.
Yes, she has.
We'll probably walk in there on our dinner recess so you can see the room. But I saw her one day and all I saw was her eyes peeking over a pile of boxes. If the boxes had fallen on her, she'd have been crushed. I warned her, don't get too close to those boxes. But she's been in there working very hard. And if we can't make July, we'll work on it.
I heard July, I was already committed.
Betty, did you
Okay.
need to clarify anything on the budget as well?
I did. Your minutes of the last meeting, Susan, we both went back and listened to the recording of that, and the minutes were written up exactly the way it happened in that meeting, where Mr. Kuntz had requested funds for broadband project. I think it was $65,000 or something, $65,000. And a motion was made and seconded and acted on, and then Mr. Walker came back and said, well, they don't need that much money because we already have some funds
We have some budgeted this year.
for the broadband authority, that they really only need $32,000. But nothing was changed, so I just want to make sure, are we giving them a total of appropriation of $65,000 and keeping what they have in their budget there? You know, so it's an additional 65, or are we only giving 32 for a total of the 65?
Blindly, I walked out thinking we were just going to reach that 65. So if there's money left over, then I think all we should have appropriated is what we take to take it up to 65. And John said that that's what they're looking
And
for.
if that's the case, then you need to make another motion to do that.
That's how I thought, when we talked about it, I said that was kind of the consensus of thought after we had done the math. But Betty's more comfortable if y'all take a new vote.
So this is how you balance the budget.
Wonderful, isn't
And
it?
is that the correct procedure? Doing that? Okay.
Yeah, somebody needs to make a motion to rescind the action taken at the last meeting appropriating 65,000 and make a motion to appropriate 32,000.
I'll move that we rescind the action taken at the last meeting to appropriate $65,000 to the Broadband Authority. Can I make it the same motion?
Make it two motions.
Okay.
We have a motion, is there a second? I can second things too, guys, I'll second.
I'll second.
All right.
I'll second.
I'll second. Any discussion?
Yeah, I was asking for what I was asking for, and the way it went down was what we intended as the broadband authority. We're going to need a lot more than this once construction gets started. So we're just going to be coming back asking for more. So I think
This would just take it to June 30th. So
Yeah.
are you going to need more funds before June 30th?
no.
Okay.
That's kind of why we did it the way we did. Very good.
Okay, any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Hearing none, the ayes have it.
Second motion.
And I move that the board, we appropriating
Yes.
Supplemental
It's
appropriation.
supplemental appropriation for $32,000 to the Broadband Authority.
I'll second.
Have a motion duly seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Hearing none, so ordered. Thank you, Betty. Moving on to item B, I believe we've been approached to purchase a table at the Pride of Middlesex Rotary fundraiser, which will be honoring Carlton Revere this year. So I have an opinion on this, but I'd like to hear others.
Being a Rotarian and former host of the event, I will recuse myself.
Well, I'd like to make a motion that we do buy a table and would look forward to it, especially honoring Carlton Revere.
The board does have I think $4,000 in a miscellaneous line item in their budget for these purposes.
We have a motion, is there a second?
I'll second it.
All right, well, in discussion, you all know how I feel about taking public funds and putting them in what I'll call private places. We need to support our civic clubs, we need to support our scouts, or all of the other good projects in the county. But I'm reluctant, and I made the statement about a yearbook ad that we were asked to pay for after we paid $8 million to the schools. I just felt like a yearbook ad's a nice thing, but that might not be the best use of public funds. So to that end, I'd be willing to put my money where my mouth is, and if there are 6 other county people that will sit at my table, I'll buy that table.
I'll sit at your table, but I'll buy my seat.
Well, heck with you anyway. So,
In lieu of the county paying.
in lieu of the county buying the table, I'll buy the table. And I would like citizens to be thinking about how they can support these good organizations in our county and not be just, I call it churning taxpayer money, where we take taxes from people and then put it over here and put it over here where it's not to the benefit of the majority of citizens. So there you go. So we have a motion that's seconded. That was my discussion. Do we want to call for the question? All those in favor of the county buying the table, say aye.
Aye.
All those in favor of the county not buying the table and Chip Holt buying the table?
That's a different.
I'm sorry. All those opposed?
Well, we don't need a,
We have to vote this through.
Yeah.
All those opposed?
aye.
Okay, so the opposition has it as a substitute motion. If somebody would make a move.
So that was a 2-2 tie, so
It's a tie.
it goes down.
It doesn't
Yeah.
pass.
It's a tie. But you can vote.
Do we have to move that you and I split a table?
No, I don't think so. I don't think we have to make a motion on that. That's not county money. Okay? In that case, John and I will fight it out over who pays what on that table.
I'll go in on that
Okay?
for 2.
I'm out now.
I can't buy my way in. I don't blame you, it's budget season.
Okay, we get to the supervisor comment section. Where do y'all want to start? Want to start with Pete or Kathy?
Ladies first.
No, I'm not ready.
Pete.
Not ready. Have to start with Pete. Supervisor comments?
None.
None. Wayne?
I did attend the Middle Peninsula Planning Commission, and basically we went over the rural transportation we adopted that, and also we approved a resolution of local dredging projects. And also we adopted Middle Peninsula CDBG priorities. And basically that was all we did on that. I also attended the St. Clair Walker Historical Committee. We had Ray Rose that came in, and he's going to do some videos on some of the students that went to the school for like a educational part of it. And also, what else did we do? Because I got there a little late to the meeting. But there's a lot of rich history that they do have with pictures and different things. Also, the Croxton's going to come back. We haven't met with them yet because they haven't crossed the T's and dot the I's yet on signing everything and with the architects, but they should be meeting the committee in April. So Ryan and Travis had contacted me and said they would be there in April to talk with the committee and kind of look over things and look at their architectural work. Also, I'll have a Ultrafest Foundation meeting Thursday. And that's it for my
thank you.
committee reports.
Let's see, Matt and I forget who all else and I participated in a conference call with Hampton Road Sanitation District. Usually it's staff and them, but for some reason I was included in on that. So we covered some territory there. Matt and Pete and I met in the conference room to get more educated on drip dispersion. Had a couple of experts there to help us with that, and it was a very interesting, and I think it's good for us to have in the back of our minds what fallback positions we might have in the event that something with Hampton Road Sanitation District doesn't go exactly the way we want it to. And Matt, I don't know at what point we've got money in the budget that's yet to be approved for the multi-use paths. I know Mark has been doing some work on that. At an appropriate time, if he could address the board and tell us what progress is being made there.
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman. I had him on the agenda to come, well, I had him plan to come and be on this agenda. We had a little bit of a snafu happen, and our planner, our transportation planner with the PDC left us. So that position's vacant now. The person he was working with is no longer there. But I will have him come brief the board in April.
Okay, thank you very much.
Very good.
That's all I have.
My turn?
Yes.
I wanted to address the one public comment regarding workforce housing and the notion that 42 deputies, of them, only one of them is renting. I had no idea what the renting status was of many of our workforce until I was exploring this project with the Middlesex Foundation, and I did the tour of the Mercer facility in Kilmarnock. And this is something we already knew, and maybe we haven't publicized it well enough, but the deputy department in particular, they generally don't rent. And so they're probably very unlikely to be the people that are going to be living in our workforce housing at Cook's Corner. That said, I'm still very confident that we're going to fill out those units, and I personally think we're going to regret that we didn't build more. So I'm not sure what the comment was intended for, but Bob, I'm happy to talk with you afterwards and get a better sense of what you're driving at there. But we kind of, my point is we kind of knew that this isn't really going to be the deputies that are filling out those apartments. My second item, and I alluded to it with when Joyce McGowan was up there for VDOT, I happen to live off of Twiggs Ferry, and I've noticed anecdotally a significant amount of crashes on that road. And so I've asked both the Sheriff's Department and VDOT to look at this and see if it triggers any of their alarms for just a high or inordinate amount of crashes, and they, as you heard, are going to look into that. So that's something I'm working on. Broadband, I've spent increasingly, it seems, every month more and more time on broadband, and I'm learning a lot. But I think what we're starting to realize is there are going to be there's three prongs of strategy as to how we deploy more broadband in the county. And the way we're socializing it, and you're going to see more of this on social media as we poll community members to see where the projects should be for expanded broadband access. But we have what I call macro, micro, and nano projects. Basically, you can see where we're putting in the water, and we intend to put in conduit alongside that dig once opportunity so that we can light up the towers and hit a large amount of available people who currently don't have 25 down and 3 up, which is broadband. That's the macro. The micro is places where we know from Atlantic Broadband and from community members that there's this one little road that has 20 people living on it that just there's no fiber in the ground, because the free market has looked at it and it's not worth going that extra distance for the number of people on that circuit. What we've learned is that the market has evaluated those projects and simply said it's not in the money. That doesn't mean they don't have money that they would allocate to such a project. So it's out of the money, it's just a question of how far out of the money is it. And what we're looking for are these micro projects where maybe we extend the fiber with private industry and pool funding to get them to more customers, and then have the customers pay what they would normally pay, and then they're connected. That's the micro project. But the one that I'm even more excited about, because I think it can be cost neutral, which is almost impossible to do for us, because when you look for grant funding, Middlesex, as I understand it, falls into the donut. And there seems to be a donut in every issue these days, but we're underserved, but we're not underserved enough. So when they talk about funding rural broadband expansion, they're really looking for people that look worse than us. So it's hard to find money. But the nano project that I'm looking at is instances where one customer has gone to Atlantic Broadband, in our case, because that's the only fiber provider in town, and they've said, I'd like service. And they do a proposal, and they say, well, you're this many linear feet away. It's $8 a linear foot to bury cable. $8,000 and we'll hook you up. And that's where a lot of people say, I'd love to, but I simply can't. And then they start getting upset with the private industry and blah, blah, blah. The point is, what I'm looking to do is I'm seeking a grant from a couple sources, and we haven't decided on that yet as an authority. But with that grant, I'm going to create, hopefully, a pool of money from which we can do low interest, maybe 1% loans to these people who, you know, or maybe $3,000, $6,000 out of the money in terms of getting broadband service. The idea there is, if you're going to put any county money into somebody getting expanded broadband access, the immediate question you're going to get from anyone is, why are they getting it and I'm not? So the answer to that is, well, we'll offer you the same opportunity. You go and find out how much it's going to cost you to get broadband. You already probably know that if you've investigated. Not only are we going to work with the local provider to get the cost down, because we know that they value these customers at about $1,200 a customer. So if it's a $5,000 cost, we know we can get $1,200. We can shake industry down for $1,200. And now you have this smaller amount to get the loan done. And I'm hoping that I can get the grant money to be able to pilot this. And hopefully, you know, what we're talking about in broadband expansion in rural communities is the last mile. What that means is it's literally going out and talking to individuals, which is something that only a broadband authority can do, because private industry's already looked at these projects and said they're not worth it to us. So anyway, we've made a lot of progress. I feel like people are talking about broadband, people are interested in broadband. I thought this might be a decent forum for me to just sort of let you know what we're working on, so that you know that it's not that there's nothing happening, it's just that there's a lot of understanding and learning to be done for us to get to this point. And finally, I want to advertise March 15th. I will be holding another town hall at Free Shade Community Center at 6 o'clock. I did so on February 15th last month, and Matt would tell you I was a bit premature because we only really had the expense data for the county budget. Now we have the revenue data, and it's not pretty. We're looking at 1.635 million shortfall. So when you look at all of our expenses from the departmental requests, and you look at all of the revenues, we're at 1.6 off. So where does that come from? And that's what I want to talk with the community about in the town hall. Part of why this has happened is healthcare. A big part of this is healthcare costs continue to go up. We also are looking at raising the salaries of county employees and school employees, because we're still behind in terms of comparing with region. And the other piece of this that I want to touch on in my town hall is just the fact that our state funding is only up 0.7% basically. So our property values are stagnant, state funding is stagnant, but our costs continue to go up, and we have to figure out what are we going to do to cover our costs. And so I would encourage you to please invite your friends and neighbors and join me March 15th, 6 o'clock, Free Shade Community Center. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Kathy.
Okay. I wanted to let you know, I serve on the Community Programs Management Committee, which is gives me a window into some of the special needs and family situations in our county. I went and visited on an invitation to Avalon Center. This is a women's shelter. Most of us have heard of Laurel Shelter in Gloucester, which used to be providing services in this area. They are no longer operating. Avalon Center has an office and an office facility in Matthews, and they have a residential facility in Williamsburg, and had a very good meeting with the director there and Leslie. Anyway, the point is she's trying to reach out to the community to make sure that people know that the services are available. Rebecca Morgan, of course, knows, but any organization, I gave her a few names of people who are working with youth. They can do preventative type programs and those kind of things. So Avalon Center in Matthews, and I can get more information if you need it. The airport committee, the planning district commission, I was there with Wayne, and I just wanted to say, one of the interesting things I took away from that is that they have some grant money and some loan money for septic system repairs. The grant money is gone. The loan money, I think there's like $2,000 left. They have been, had a record number of requests for septic systems failing because of the wet weather. And it's just something to kind of be aware of if that's a regional issue. And the airport committee, I went to a library event, the Mardi Gras, the Hartfield Fire Department. My point of all that is there is a tremendous amount of community involvement in this community, and I'm just continually impressed, and I'm really glad to see rooms that are filled to capacity in the middle of winter, and I think that we need to remember as we struggle with some of our concerns that people really are engaged and volunteering and active in the community and supporting it. One final thing, just to be on your radar, June 1st and 2nd for the Arts in the Middle, the Virginia Fine Arts Museum has an Artmobile, a tremendous vehicle. It's going to be coming here to the Art Festival. So you will see.
Nice.
Yes.
I'd like to add one comment, sort of dovetailing on John's comments, but I have encouraged citizens, and still got a good number of citizens here, to please engage themselves in our budget process, because if you don't understand the wants and needs on this hand and the revenues on the other hand, it's really hard for you to have a justifiable reaction to a tax rate. And I just would encourage, we've got more work to do to make this budget a reality, and we had 2 members of the electoral board and 1 citizen this morning for, what we have, a 3-hour session this morning.
7 or 8, I thought.
So, anyway, I just would encourage you to talk to your friends and neighbors, and please get them engaged, because we want you to understand what's happening. Our county is not organically growing right now. Property values are stagnant, expenses go up. There you go. So that would be my last comment. If there's nothing else to come before this session of the March meeting, we can go in.
Are you going to take any action on the feasibility study?
I don't think, do we need action on the feasibility study?
That's the airport. They want you to pass it on to the state. I think they did for some action. They want
Did
you
you
to
want
accept
action to
it.
pass it along to the state?
Accepted it and referred
Okay.
to the state.
So I'm sorry, we should have done that while you were still front and center. In that case, the chair will entertain a motion to forward the feasibility study.
Accept it and then forward it.
Accept it and forward it to the Virginia Department of Aviation.
I also move that.
Can you recite that again?
Yeah.
Or no?
I can if you want.
We got a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion duly seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Hearing none, so ordered, and we are in recess until our 7 o'clock public hearing.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, this is special exception 2019-01, and it's submitted by Bay Design Group on behalf of the Middlesex Foundation. I think Bruce D. Simone is here tonight to represent this application as well. I understand Bay Design's applicant is on his honeymoon, I believe, or something of that nature. So anyway, this request is for approval of a special exception to construct 2 12-unit apartment buildings for workforce housing in the Village Community Zoning District in accord with Section 8-326 of the county ordinance. Of course, here's a brief narrative. We have the parcel number. We see that the total acreage is in excess of 13 acres. For the most part, the property is vacant. Comp plan depicts this area for mixed-use residential commercial uses. And we had various uses that surround the property. Of course, if board remembers, workforce housing was added to the ordinance as a special exception use back in September. And this shows the current zoning. As we can see, this is mostly village community area. We have a little general business to the west and LDR to the east. And the comprehensive plan pretty much correlates with what we have now. This is the site that we have, the project area. Most of it, of course, is behind the social services and school administration building. This is mostly is going to be taken up, located in this clearing that's depicted as project area. There will be some additional clearing necessary for construction. This is the preliminary concept plan that was submitted by Bay Design. You can see the two buildings highlighted in yellow. Shows the location of it. They have in the parking in the loop drive that runs around it. You can see the access will come adjacent to the existing social services building and through that way. And of course, here's a couple pictures. Most of us are familiar with this. This is not news to us. We know what this looks like. Workforce housing, multifamily dwellings up to 2 stories are allowed in the VC district with approval of a special exception. The use is subject to the following special exception criteria of 841. Of course, we have a minimum 1 acre requirement, which exceeds that. We have 13 acres, and we also are required to have 100 feet on a public street or highway. Currently, we're at 221 feet in excess of that, which exceeds the 100-foot requirement. Of course, based on the analysis above, the special exception request is in substantial conformance with the requirements of Section 8.3, 26.8.4, and Section 20-5B of the Middlesex County Ordinance. Of course, we all know this project will require major site plan approval, which includes but not limited to approval for Virginia Department of Transportation for entrances, of course, DEQ for stormwater, and the appropriate utility authorities for water and sewerage. Of course, the request will have to also adhere to the lighting requirements for Article 17C and landscape requirements for 17B. The Planning Commission recommendation, they voted 8-0 with 2 abstentions with 1 absent to approve Special Exception 2019-01. Staff recommends approval of this application with the following conditions upon Special Exception 2019-01. The use shall meet the criteria in those particular sections listed, and the approval shall be subject to final major site plan approval. And that concludes my presentation, Mr. Chairman. I'll let you turn it over for public
Questions or
comment.
comments from the board to Mr. Kratz? In that case, we will open the public comment period on this issue. Do we have any members of the public who would like to address the board?
I am Bruce DeSimone, the chair of the Middlesex Foundation. I think Mr. Kretz did a great job of describing what we're requesting, and I'm really just here to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay.
Pretty straightforward to me.
Thank you.
All right, then, we will close the public comment period, and the chair will entertain a motion on Special Exception 2019-01.
I would
like to make that motion.
I'll second.
Move to approve and second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Hearing none, so ordered. Second item on the agenda is the Saluda Honorary Historic District. And Dave, you said you were going to kick it off. I've got a question before we get going.
Yes, sir.
You said you were going to turn it over to, are you going to make the presentation and then each person that speaks gets 3 minutes or 12 minutes if they're speaking for 4? Or how are we going to work?
What I'm just going to do is I'm going to give you just a brief overview of where we were at, maybe a minute or so, just discussing, showing what we're doing here while we're here, so everybody else can understand too.
I guess what I'm saying,
And
you
then-
said that Ms. South would be making.
That's correct.
Following you up, so do you want to make her part of staff's
I would-
report and not be under a timer is what I'm sort of getting at.
That's okay. If that's acceptable with the board, that's a board
No problem.
decision.
Marilyn, is that all right with you?
I'm just trying to sort out what Mr. Kratz has to present is the findings from the planning commission to discuss this issue.
Correct.
And then there would be the public comment.
Okay, so you would just want a public comment? Okay, fine.
Yeah. And then it's just a matter of whether or not we would do 12 minutes as a group, or each would do 3.
4 people each giving up their 3, 1 person gets 12 is what that rule is. Okay, I'm clear.
Okay, and I'm just, it's just to refresh everybody's memory, that back in December, the board sent this back for a recommendation from the Planning Commission. What we did is I pulled together a little information that was presented to me from the Virginia Department of Historic Resources. I presented that to the Planning Commission in their staff report. They looked at one of the operative things they were looking at was how this entwined, I guess, with the zoning ordinance. So at this time, there's no proposal to incorporate this into the Middlesex County zoning ordinance. This is standalone. It's strictly, it's not law. It will not be incorporated into our code as proposed the way it is today. And that was given to the Planning Commission, and of course that was a stipulation with the Planning Commission as well, that's not being addressed at this time by the Planning Commission. So they looked at the proposal on the merits of it just being an honorary district. So this was the information. I'm not going to read this, but this was in your board packets. This is the facts that were provided by the Virginia Department of Historic Resources. This basically gives an overview that it's basically it does not restrict an owner's use of the property as long as non-governmental funds are used. That's probably the biggest thing. And also, you see, there's also certain things might trigger certain review or environmental review and that type of thing. So, and then number 4, again, this was in your board packet. I'm not going to reiterate this. So this was provided to the Planning Commission. This was part of what they based their decision on. The Planning Commission recommendation was 5-3 with 1 member absent and 2 abstaining, voted to recommend the Saluda Honorary Historic District. As noted, incorporation of any historic district into the Middlesex County zoning ordinance is not currently proposed. And of course, staff really has no recommendation at this time because it doesn't have any provisions in the ordinance. So at this point, Mr. Chairman, I will turn it over to you for public comment, or however you...
Did you cover the ask with this?
The
ask, $6,000? Isn't that part of...
It was part, yeah, they were under the understanding this was part of a budgetary request.
Okay. Any questions or comments to be directed at...
You're going to abstain from participating?
Yeah, I'm going to make my comment now, and then I can still comment, can't I, Mike? No?
You got to abstain from participating.
Okay. I will be abstaining from participating on council's advice since I have ownership interest in commercial property in the district.
I'll turn it over.
All right, at this point, we'll open the public comment period. First citizen, please.
There are other people here, or do you necessarily want to start?
It's
Yeah.
whoever stands up first can come up here first. It doesn't make any difference. We're going to be here until everybody that wants to speak has a chance.
Good evening, members of the board. I'm Thomas Foley. I previously sent you a letter, and I was thinking about the letter that I sent you, and I was wondering perhaps I've been too precipitous, because this letter, as I was rereading the board minutes, this proposal supposedly carries benefits for the homeowners in the historic district, meaning tax credits, rehabilitation credits. She also said, the person that made the presentation to you said that due to a grant created after Hurricane Sandy, property owners can apply for funds to repair buildings in historic districts. That didn't sound right to me, so I went to their website and I found this answer. Are grants available for registering a property for maintenance and repairs of a registered property? And the answer is there are no current grants available to an individual for repairs and maintenance on a property. The grants that are available are for archaeological threatened sites, certified local government grants, survey and planning cost share, Virginia battlefield preservation. They have incentives for easements, rehabilitation, tax credits, Virginia Land Conservation Fund, Virginia Main Street Program, period. So I said, let's look a little further. I mean, how much of a loan can I get? And I mean, the roof is going to need replacement, and I'd like, a nice loan for that. But there are limitations on the way this works. And to answer a question, how much money do I have to spend to get rehabilitation credits? Under the federal program, the project must be a substantial rehabilitation to qualify the investor for the credit. The Internal Revenue Service defines substantial as exceeding the owner's adjusted basis in the building, or $5,000, whichever is greater. The adjusted basis is generally defined as the purchase price minus the value of the land minus any depreciation already claimed, plus the value of any earlier capital improvements. The threshold requirement for the state program is different from the federal requirement. In order to qualify for the state credit, the rehabilitation expenses must be for owner-occupied structures, at least 25% of the assessed value of the building for local real estate tax purposes for the year before the rehabilitation work began. For other eligible structures, at least 50% of the assessed value. So these are not grants just for simple repairs and maintenance. These are very substantial repairs and maintenance that needs to be to occur. I found out that you've got all sorts of applications to fill out. I found out that there's a federal application with the...
If I could, I just need to poll the board to make sure they're good with you going over your 3 minutes. If he's fine, I'm fine,
right.
But we do have a 3 minute.
Okay. The Historic Preservation Certification application has to be filed with the National Park Service, and they tell you that it takes 109 hours to complete the application. That's exclusive of getting the loan, finding an accountant or an attorney or an architect or a lawyer or a civil engineer. You go on further to, there are fees involved too, substantial fees, both on the federal and both on the state. And then you find out 14 pages of regulations telling you what you can't do if you're going to qualify for this preservation credit. You're going to have to account for, with pictures before and after, if there was a little piece of ornamental woodwork before, and it's not there afterwards, you're going to have to account for that. And they can deny you the credit based on a poor job like that. You're going to need an independent audit from an accountant at the end, certifying what was the eligible expenditures and ineligible expenditures. Then you're going to have to spend time to find somebody to fill out the federal form for you, to see if you qualify for the federal credits. But all these credits are credits against tax. If you don't have a tax liability, or if your tax liability isn't equal to the credits available, those credits go to the wayside, unless you can find and partner with a charitable entity that'll somehow be able to market them in a limited partnership. My fear is that this is more of a punishment than a benefit, and I fear it's the first step, as the survey reports suggest, to going into a separate zoning district. And I'm looking at the Middlesex County Museum and Historical Society's homepage, and we see on the second paragraph that it is dedicated to acquiring by purchase, lease, gift, or otherwise records, documents, sites, buildings, and objects related to the history of Middlesex County, and to preserve that material. And what better way to preserve that material in accordance with the survey than by having a separate zoning district? So you've put a cloud over my title to my property, my free and use of that property. Were I ever to market the property, any buyer would look at it and say, well, what's next? And that will affect my value. And I hope you'll vote no. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next citizen, please. Oh, come on.
all are intimidating when you walk up here. My name's Larry Tuning, 126 Wadland Street in Urbana. One reason to consider this is that there are specific funds, grant funds available that are tied to being in a historical district. At one of the early hearings, I asked one of the state representatives specifically what type of grants could Saluda get that would help this community. And she said specifically that grants this year will be directed at African American heritage, and not all, but some were directly tied to being within a historic district. And when she said that, my lights went on. We got Antioch Baptist Church over here. We got a school, which I think was called Saluda School, but it was Antioch School. It's right beside it. We got Irene Morgan and her civil rights story. We got Middlesex High School, and no, not like Essex High School, thank God. Middlesex schools did not require federal troops to show up for our students to go to school in 1963. But we did have 13 brave young black children make history by entering MHS between two rows of state police armed with shotguns. Saluda has an amazing history unto itself. Just outside of Saluda, we have that slave house. And I don't know how, at Walboro, and I don't know how many black citizens have come up to me over the years and have told me that their roots are directly tied to that slave house. Once again, Saluda has an amazing history, amazing roots. Let me tell you another way being in a historical district gives an advantage for going after all kinds of grants. I know you don't like for me to talk about Urbana, but I'm going to. Urbana is a prime example. We've had a historic district for 20 years. In over 20 years, we've leveraged hundreds of thousands of dollars in grant funds for our Virginia Street revival, for major renovations of the old tobacco warehouse, and rebuilding our town marina. Now, in most cases, our historic status has not been the main reason we got those grants. However, a few of those grants, specifically for the old tobacco warehouse, were directly tied to that historical status. Once again, most of our grants have been indirectly tied to that status, meaning that when we could check the box that showed we had created a historical district, we felt, and we were told this from others, that it gave us an advantage over other communities who were unable to check that box. $6,000 is a small price to pay for the possibilities of the many, many rewards that might come from Middlesex County, now, from Saluda being a historical district, and I just made it.
You just made it.
Thank you so much.
Next citizen, please. All y'all quite looking at each other, and come on up here.
I can just say that it's easier for us to respond in addressing concerns when we're less.
Okay, does anybody else want to address concerns? In that case?
I wrote an email to you, and Dave forwarded it on. My name is Zany Autry. My husband and I own 3 parcels in Saluda. We also reside in Urbana at Cedar Point. Just to add to what we sent, and I am very giving, my husband is very giving, but in regard to $6,000, I'll add one additional point. We're a small business located in Saluda. We do not have to be in the county of Middlesex to function as a business. Our income is not based on being physically here. But I would like to bring to your attention that in January we ran an ad in the Sentinel and also in the Gloucester paper, but primarily the Sentinel, for one office position. Well, I won't say one, an office position. This is the first time we received 31 resumes and 5 to 7 phone calls applying for the position. Normally, we only get 3 to 5 applicants when we run an ad for the office. In my opinion, this is indicative of the economy of the county and the Middle Peninsula, that we got so many applicants for one position. So with that being said, I just want to bring to your attention that it is taxpayers' money that you're using and how it seems to, in my opinion, be affecting some of the economy. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Just for y'all's knowledge, we've been here since 9:30 this morning, so if we could move along, I certainly would appreciate it.
I'm Marilyn South from 987 Mill Wharf Road. Y'all put up with me. That's what we're, the three others want to speak.
Are they forfeiting your
That's,
time?
all right, I'll take 3 minutes and then have others, we can have 3 more. Take 3 minutes.
Correct.
I'll kind of summarize real quickly. This designation does not require any of the things that Mr. Foley spoke of. That is a voluntary thing that the individual landowner would apply for. This does not put that on there. Mr. Tuning was correct. This opens up tremendous grant opportunities if we can do this. As far as, I'm trying to think of the other comments, think a minute. $6,000. This is an application for Saluda, which is a very, very important place in this county. For the museum to raise that money and not have support from the governing body within their own historic district or their historic courthouse area, it then comes across as one museum wants to do this. What we would like to think we could do is build a collaboration within the community to recognize the significance of the history here in Saluda, and then utilize that history with no restrictions to apply for grants. That's our main objective. So that's why we're asking for the $6,000. We don't want to penalize anybody. We want it to become better understood to within the community of what this brings in opportunities. So would any of the others, or do you all have any questions for me?
No, this is public comment for you to direct your comments to us, and the questions would be to ask of staff.
Any questions? Not staff. Okay. Who else would like to speak? Hi.
My name is Robert Montague. I live in Urbana at 131 Virginia Street. And I've lived in an historic district since 1964, first in Alexandria and then in Urbana. And I have not found it a hardship. I found it to be a very beneficial thing to both communities to be a part of a registered historic district that brings a prestige to the community that it doesn't have if it isn't considered historic. The word historic means we get tourists for that reason. It's one of the biggest 3 industries in Virginia, tourism. And Middlesex County likes to get tourists and have business of that sort come to the community. Being an historic district will help make that happen. Now, I have personally not found it burdensome to be living in an historic district in either of the communities that I have lived in. And I was the first chairman of the Board of Architectural Review for the town of Urbana when that historic district was established quite a few years ago. We are not asking for that type of historic district for Saluda. We will not be getting a Board of Architectural Review. It is not becoming a part of the zoning ordinance as it is in both Urbana and Alexandria, where I have had experience. It's a different sort of thing. It's much more of a promotional thing for the community and bestows a certain prestige on the community that doesn't have right now. And Saluda is historic enough to deserve to be an historic district as much because Chesty Puller lived here as for any other one reason. His house is not that old and it isn't that remarkable, but he is a figure in American history that has a connection to Saluda. And he alone justifies Saluda becoming an historic district as far as I'm concerned. And I hope that the Board of Supervisors will not be too sparing in expense on this matter, because it is a real benefit for the community and not just for the property owners, but for the county as a community to have this town made an historic district. So I urge you to approve the appropriation for $6,000, because speaking as president of the museum, we are not a well-endowed organization. We ask you for other financial help every year to try to keep our function going in this community. And we need to get this help to make this happen to Saluda. It is not strictly a benefit for the museum, but we are the sponsoring organization, as we should be. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Good evening. My name is Hallie Holmes, and I'm speaking on behalf of Antioch Baptist Church in the absence of Reverend Fred Holmes. Saluda, I can share my own little history about Saluda. From where I live now, you used to have to ride the bicycle down to Saluda because the cars were not available. The men would have the cars going to work. So I was the girl to run the errands. The post office, the church, the Haneys, Mrs. Walden, that had the post office, the Little Saluda Market, and all. And I am for this proposal to be historical district. Now, Antioch Baptist Church in itself, my great-grandfather was one of the founding members of that church. Started in 1865, laying the first foundation there. And it's a lot of history here in the Saluda district. And I am proud of this history in Saluda district. Thank you.
Thank you. Next citizen, please.
Good evening. I am not a citizen of Saluda. I'm with the Department of Historic Resources. My name is Elizabeth Lipford. I'm with the Eastern Regional Office, which includes the Middle Peninsula. My office is in Richmond. We've been working with Middlesex County for 4 or 5 years now in helping to identify historic resources. And it did begin with the Sandy Grant, in which after Hurricane Sandy, the Historic Preservation Fund, which is managed by Congress, did allocate funds to all the states that were affected by that hurricane. And the grants that were available, it is true, they are no longer available. The grants were available after the storm for owners of historic properties to repair damage done by Hurricane Sandy. But there were also funds available for planning in areas that are threatened by coastal storms. And Middlesex County was one of those counties. And so $67,000 was given to Middlesex County in cooperation with the county to identify historic resources in vulnerable areas. And the whole intent was to help plan for future incidents or just as a general planning tool. And out of that study came a recommendation for a historic district in Saluda. But there's still a little bit more work to be done to actually get it listed. And that's where the state grant program comes in, the cost share program, which we recommend a matching grant, and that's what's before you now, is a request for $6,000. And then we would match that with $6,000 to go ahead and get the historic district nomination completed. So that is the purpose of that, and it is a planning tool. The intent is for the county to have this information to use for a variety of planning tools. And there are voluntary programs available, like the tax credits that were mentioned by Mr. Foley. The purpose of that program is for substantial rehabilitation, because rehabilitation can be expensive. The intent was not for repair and that type of thing, but to help offset those costs. And it certainly would not be a program a property owner would become involved in unless it was going to benefit them financially. So that's a decision that each property owner has to make. And it is completely voluntary. So it is an honorary designation. We have hundreds of these districts all over Virginia. We're working on some right now in this area: Essex County, King and Queen County, Southampton County, Matthews.
I'll need the board to say it's okay to go over time.
Sure.
Y'all good?
Okay, well, I'm almost finished.
That's fine. I just, as a courtesy to all.
Well, I just want to, and I've addressed you in December and said a lot of the same things, so I really don't want to repeat myself, but just as another example of a type of grant that's available right now, the National Trust for Historic Places, which is a private organization, has the Sacred Places Grant. And these are for historic churches that need to do repair to churches. So Antioch would be eligible to apply for that grant. The other church that's here in Saluda could. But part of the requirements are that it has to be a designated historic church, either individually or within a designated historic district. So that's just another example of some funds that are out there for historic properties. There aren't a lot of them, but there are some. So, ironically, I received a call today from a gentleman who was looking at a property in Middlesex County, and that's for sale. And he said, well, it's on the register, so I just want to know if I buy this property, are there going to be any restrictions? And I said, no. It's not. You can do what you want with the property. It was nominated in the 1970s, and you're free to make any changes that you want. So it really is an honorary designation. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Chip.
If you could take 1 moment and explain the process going forward, with, the Virginia Department of Historic Resources, what
Sure.
to do, just a brief overview
Okay.
of that, because I didn't want to get into that with the board because that's your process.
Sure.
But I think it's pertinent that they know that, so how that works.
Okay, so with the project at hand, what needs to be completed is an inventory of all the resources within the proposed boundaries of the historic district. So that means hiring a consultant, an architectural historian, who will photograph each building, write a description of it, determine whether or not that building contributes to the historic district or does not contribute. And then the information is put into our database, and a description of the district there's a narrative description of the district written for the form, and then the history of Saluda. And then there's a notification process where we write letters to all the property owners, letting them know about it. Adjacent property owners, we will hold a public hearing. So all of those expenses would be covered by this grant. And then at the end of the process, we would present the nomination to the Board of Historic Resources, and if they approve it, it's listed on the Virginia Register. And the grant program is set up so that we administer the project, so it doesn't put any administrative burden on the locality. So we will hire the consultant, we will manage the payments, we'll monitor the work, and in the end, you'll get the final product, and it will be listed on the Virginia Register and hopefully the National Register.
Thank you, David, for covering that. Thank you, ma'am.
Just a quick question, Elizabeth. So that architectural survey that you mentioned, that would be something substantially similar to the one we had performed for the properties that were located in flood-prone areas back in 2016?
Yes.
Okay. And the public hearing that you mentioned, the public hearing would be here in the community or in
Yes.
Richmond? Here?
It would be here.
Okay.
And it would, we would post the notice for it, work with you to find a location. This would be a perfect location. And everyone who's in the district and adjacent to the district would be invited to come and comment.
So
and
there
then,
is a public hearing at that point in time for y'all's process?
yes, yes, and that is in the Virginia Code. And then the minutes and the comments will be provided to the Board of Historic Resources and the State Review Board prior to their consideration of the district.
So I just want to see if I've understood this correctly. So the $6,000 that the museum is looking for from the Board of Supervisors would be coupled with $6,000 from the Historical
Yes.
Resources Department?
Yes.
And that together is the application fee to get the process going?
Correct, yes.
So in a sense, it's a matching grant. We need a 50% match for your $6,000.
Yes, that's ideal. Even if you didn't come in with 50% and a request us to match at a higher amount, we would certainly consider that. The 50% is not required.
Okay.
It's just recommended. It makes you more competitive.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Anyone else like to speak to the subject at hand? Seeing none, we will close the public comment period, and I suppose we'll go back to the supervisors for any questions or comments they might have or motions that they might want to make.
I'd like Dave to come back up here and just, could you come back up and just clarify? My understanding that, when you create this district, if people have homes, so they want to know, they can, and I understand that they can do whatever they want with their home, only the people that want to participate in that program, right?
Well, my understanding, this may be more a question for Elizabeth, but
right.
My understanding, as long as government funds aren't leveraged, there's no special requirements. In other words, if the district is going to have boundaries.
Right.
And all the properties within that boundary will be listed. It's not going to be a pick or choose type of thing. If you look back to this, I'll go back to this map. So all of these properties will be listed. My understanding from what's been provided, there's no requirements, there's no binding regulations on any of these properties, provided they don't try to leverage government funds to do this particular work. And I stand corrected from them
Yeah, I just want to be clear so the citizens will know that, say for example, if you're anywhere in that district, and say like for example, if you're in that and you want to put a business, if it was available with land there in that district, you could put a business in with no strings attached from that.
No, as proposed, that's my understanding. That's correct.
And the only people that would affect if you have a historical property and you decide that you want to do something with grants or different things like that, then you fall under their requirements.
Well,
But it doesn't, but in other words, it doesn't dictate to all the property owners that's in the district.
I
That's
think
why
any-
I was trying to make it clear so everybody knows that. Because, you know, you got people that thinking that, well, since I'm in this historic district, I only can paint my house black, white, or green. It's not that case. It's just the only, that the historical buildings or anybody that want to participate it, that falls under that criteria, they can benefit from tax credits or whatever on those properties. So-
True, but I think it would apply to anybody that anybody in the district that leverages those particular funds or tax credits.
Right.
Whether it may be a historic house or not. But I think if they leverage, they're in the district and they
Oh, yeah, if you
use
leverage.
the district designation
Right.
as a tool to leverage funds, then they would be subject to the requirements
Right.
that go
That's
with
what-
it.
I understand that. I just want to make that clear so everyone knows that, you know, just because you're in that historic district, you know, that doesn't mean that you have to fall under whatever that is because you're not participating in that.
Right, as proposed, right now, there's no paint police or anything of that nature as it's proposed today.
Now, down the road, could that be changed?
Well, I think there's another level of a historic district, and also state code allows for a locality to adopt a historic district in their zoning code. So there's another, this is true. So you could actually raise the level of historic district. There's one level above this, I believe, or 2 levels of historic district above this.
No, not necessarily above it, but if the locality wanted to have a district, that's something you would do.
Okay. Well, I know the State Code of Virginia allows for the inclusion of a historic district in their zoning ordinance. They have special language for that. That would have to go through another process, whole different that would go through our process if we were going to include that into our zoning ordinance. The process they're going to use is their process. It's another state code section that oversees that particular process. It's similar to the same one we use for planning commission, notification of adjoining property owners, letters to adjoining property owners and the owners in the district, and public 2 weeks notification in the paper. What I remember reading about it, it's very similar to what we would do for our public processes. And what I read, if I'm wrong, the owners have an opportunity to object. There's a process for owners to object, and my understanding, if there's 51% of the owners in objection, then that they have to hold the application until those issues are resolved. So, from what I can understand, an apathetic property owner would equal a yes vote. So, does that help any?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Any other questions of David? And as I stated earlier, I will be abstaining from this vote because of ownership interest in commercial property. So at this point, I suppose the chair would close the public comment period, if we haven't already done it, and entertain a motion.
I'll stay.
Yes. Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion that we pay the $6,000 and Saluda be able to get the honorary historic district designation.
I'll second it.
Motion duly seconded. Is there any discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I would just like to note again, as people have tried to, that it's not the board's intent to go to a rezoning to a historic district that would put requirements on people. And I would like to commend the committee for bringing this to our attention, and also for highlighting the more recent history that is noteworthy in Saluda. And if this is a means for telling our story and having the conversations like the one that was here about a month ago in this courtroom, and if this can facilitate more of that, then I think it's a good thing.
further discussion? Call for the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Hearing none with one abstention, so ordered. All righty then. All right, we do have a public comment period that we can open up now that the business is done. Is there anybody that would like to address the board on any issues of interest? Y'all are maybe more ready to go than I am. We will close the public comment period and entertain a motion.
So moved.
Entertain a motion for adjournment.
Second.
Vote with your feet.